Then let's get started, Siddharth. Maybe by the time your talk is done, maybe Souvik will share his link.
Yeah, I'll just share the link in a while.
Okay, perfect. I'm going to share my screen. Just give me a second. Yes. Okay. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Nice. Okay, so I want to talk about design primitives for React developers. Let me set some context. So I'm Sid. I'm a developer at Code Sandbox. And before this, I used to work at the design system team at Auth0. All of the links and articles that I share in this talk are on this URL. It's like sid.st/primitives, right? So if you like everything I mention, there's a link to that in that URL, which you can see later. I'm a developer, but I really like design. But like, don't get me wrong, liking design doesn't mean that I'm good at design. So I'm pretty bad. To set the context, let me show you like what my process looks like. So this is, I recorded myself trying to build something. So I was trying to build like a vacation rental kind of an app, something like an Airbnb. And you can see I added all the input elements first, right? I'm adding the label and the inputs. And then this is like, after this, I wanted to style it, right? So what you usually do is, right, you put some margins first, right? That's where you start. And then I put some label, change the fonts, made everything like bigger. The default sizes are very small. And then I was trying to do border radius where like this weird border came because that's the browser's default. So then you got to inspect element. And then I'm trying to see like, is 5 pixel good? Or is like, then I'm like trying down and saying it's 3 pixel is better or 5 pixel or 4, right? So you have to kind of try it. You have to override the default. And then, you know, this is how I choose my color. I pick something name and then try to like move around and then, you know, hit and try something looks good, then I use it. This has kind of been my process for a really long time. And then, you know, same goes for the button. I wanted to look like the Airbnb pink. So again, go to the color picker, pick something. This whole thing kind of did not look like it was in a place. So I tried to put it in a card. You know, I put the card and the card is white and then you need a background. So there's this like hipster tailwind blue that is trending these days. So I tried to do that. And then I'm giving it like some padding so that it looks contained in a card. Same thing for shadows, use the dev tools to tweak the shadow a little. And then, you know, this is kind of the output. So let me show you that. This is what I could come up with, right? And as you can see, like it doesn't, well, first of all, I want to know like who else, like who can relate to this process? Does your like front-end design process look the same when you're working on a side project or something, right? If you can, I think if you drop anything in the chat, I can see the notifications there, right? So if it's relatable, let me know. So this looks fine. I mean, it's a thing, but it doesn't really look like it doesn't look like a website you would actually put your credit card and book a vacation, right? It kind of looks shady. So it doesn't really look how it should. So I kind of went and like tried to learn about design, right? Where do I start? So I read a bunch of theory where I started with like, okay, there's RGB and there's CMYK. These are like the different kind of, what do you say, color modes that people use. And oops, sorry, let me click here. And then there's this like theory about complementary colors and analogous colors, and then like on the color wheel, and there's triadic colors, which are on 3 ends of the triangle. So for example, this logo uses 2 opposite ends, like almost, and it looks good, right? I learned that Burger King uses like a triadic thing where it uses the 3 colors which are in the opposite, like make a triangle on the color wheel, and it kind of looks, it's supposed to look good. Then I also learned about fonts. So you know how serif fonts and sans serif fonts are there, and then when to use them. So for example, Uber, when they did their redesign, they chose like a sans serif font, but also like a very, very rounded font so that the brand looks more friendly. And then the New York Times has a very sans serif kind of thing. Like it's a very old school authoritative kind of vibe, which is, I guess, what they're going for with the news website. So all of that really helped to like at least like get the vocabulary and know how people make decisions. But it really didn't help me when I would look at this, right? When I'm starting from this point, I still didn't know what to do, right? Like I still don't know what colors or like how much padding or like all of that was still like the theory was there, but it didn't really help me in practice. And I looked at like other sites, right? Like where can I essentially learn from? Who can I copy? Who can I get inspired from? So I looked at Google Slides, and Google Slides looks great. I looked at Airbnb, the one I was trying to imitate. That looks amazing. And it kind of like went back to like my own design. And it has all like the design theory, but it just does not look good. So then I was like, maybe, maybe design is not something that you can actually like learn from theory. Maybe it's just like some people are good at design because they have great taste, and just like the rest of us are bad at design because we just don't have good taste, right? That's what it comes down to. So that's what I thought, that like that was it. But then I kind of like started working in design system teams, and that kind of opened my world to this whole concept of like how much of design is art and how much of it is science. So I of course, like like I don't have great taste, so I gravitated towards the science side of design system. It's like science side of design, and it's like what is the science behind these things. So most of it was from like the design system teams that I worked in. I'm going to reorder the slide. And this is what I learned. So I want to share what I've learned with you. So the first concept that's kind of core to all of this is this concept of modular scales. And the concept of modular scales is that this is from Tim Brown. He wrote an article for Register Part. He said by using culturally relevant, historically pleasing ratios, right? So the moment I hear ratios, I'm like, okay, this is maths now, right? It's fractions. And it's like basing the measurements of our composition or interfaces on values from a scale. This part didn't make sense to me. We can achieve a visual harmony, right? Not found in layouts that use arbitrary, conventional, or easy divisible numbers. So this was kind of like a call out, right? I felt called out because my design process was basically arbitrary. I would go look at what other people are doing and then go to my color picker and try to do something similar, and it just would not look good. But then this word, which is visual harmony, kind of really, like that was the word that I was missing, that what does visual harmony mean? And then when I searched more, it kind of opened this entire world. So I've tried to make those, can I click this link? No. I've tried to make those concepts. I've tried to like expose those concepts for myself, like as a developer, and to like other people who work with React in this library I called React UI. And it's not like built from scratch. It's not unique ideas. It's built on system UI, style system, emotion.js, and a bunch of design theory that I read. So if you go to the website or the GitHub repo, there is getting started. And even if you like don't use React or don't want to use a library, I've written a lot about like what are the ideas inside it. So a lot of ideas that I learned are kind of documented. So even if you don't want to use the library, it would be really interesting to just like see what are the concepts. I'll highlight like some of the key concepts. So let's talk about typography first. And there's like typography, color space. Typography is the first one to talk about. So browsers come with the 16 pixel default for body. And this is like, if you put 16 pixel, you kind of get some size. Now, how do you create more sizes for yourself? There's this theory around harmonious scales or modular scales, which basically says if you multiply that with the same number over and over, you kind of get a scale, right? So for example, if you have 1.125, if I multiply 16, I get 18. Now I can multiply 18 and get another number, and I keep getting a scale which goes up, and then I can divide to keep getting numbers that go down. How did I get this random number? It's like there's tons of research. You can go to Modular Scale. I've also linked it in this link that I shared at the starting. So these are all of the multipliers essentially that a bunch of people have put research in. And you can see like the names kind of match, a lot of names match music. So like how music has octaves and thirds and notes, it kind of goes on the same theory on like what is harmonious. But some of these are also like from other things, like from nature, like golden ratio comes from basically observing nature. So I don't fully understand why these numbers are the numbers they are, but like that's fine. I kind of only understand what do you say, like what do I have to multiply with? So then I picked this number because it created like a small, like I was building an application, so I wanted something close by, like a tens kind of set. So I multiplied by the, I chose major second, and this is basically my scale. Sorry. Yeah, so this is basically my scale. And then how do you represent this in React? So, well, let me, different tab. Okay, so I basically have this application here which imports the theme provider from React UI. The implementation details are boring. You don't have to really care about that. But you basically wrap in a theme provider. And this is what my theme looks like. So it's how I represent these values is basically in an object, right? I say font sizes, and I go from 0 to 10. And 0 is like, I just like 0 being 0, and then 1, 2, 3, 4. Like I just put them in a scale. And what this does is that if you use a text component, then you kind of can say text size 1, size 2, size 3, right? So you kind of get a scale for yourself. And then when you have to choose a value, you're not really right-clicking inspect, like you're not really doing hit and trial, right? Because then it comes down to like, how good is your design taste that you can hit and try and actually get something good. This kind of relies on like, I created a scale first based on some math, based on some ratios. And now when I want to choose, I go up and down in this. So let me show you an example which kind of makes this point slightly nicer to understand. Okay, let's see. Whoops, now it runs fine. Perfect. So this is like this is basically copied from Airbnb, where I have this image and then I have these 3 text lines. So now the decisions I'm making are not so much about like what's the font size, what's the color. I'm thinking about what is the most important information here, right? So I'd say the stunning, like the label is kind of important. This is what you'd remember. The entire apartment is useful, but it's secondary information. So if I have these text size, I would say like this should be a smaller size, right? It's slightly smaller. Maybe I want to go a little more small. Okay, this feels okay, but maybe this feels too less, right? So I'm going to stick to 3. So you see, I'm still doing trial and error, right? I'm not an expert. I'm still like experimenting on what looks good to the eye. But having this set, I'm only experimenting. Like if something is less important, I'm going to tone it down by 1 size. If something is more important, I'm going to tone it up for 1 size, right? So it kind of gives you like these constraints to actually design. Similarly, I think like the price can be slightly smaller so that it's secondary information. But maybe it should be bold because, like, let's be honest, that's what a lot of people would make their decisions on, right? Maybe the size was fine. Yeah, so it kind of gives you like this essentially these like values that you don't have to experiment from scratch. You kind of have to like stick to the scale, and what comes out would be better. So let's go. Let's look at another one of these, right? So color is another thing that is slightly, it's interesting. So right, my instinct was that I can take colors, I can do math on them, and then I would get like a really nice scale for color, right? It seems like very feasible. The trick with color is that colors don't act linearly. So there's this law, Weber-Fechner law, which says that increasing the quantity of the color, so like if you increase the saturation, it doesn't like change linearly. So if you look at this one, the first one, 3 and 4 are almost the same, right? Like the difference is 1, but 3 and 4 are similar. And instead, if you go 2 steps, like for example, if you see this is 1 to 2, 2 to 4, and 4 to 8, right? So the gap here is much more, and that is kind of how you get this thing, right? So it's not linear, is what I'm trying to say. By the way, there's this great talk, Diana Mounter, who's the design system lead or design ops lead at GitHub. She gave a great talk by color, which kind of informed a lot of my opinions. This is another great slide which I took from Steve Sugar. He did this thing where he basically took all of the colors, right? So the hue, and he said 100% saturation with 50% brightness, right? So they're the same level, right? If you take all of the colors and put them at 50% brightness, and put them on the chart. And luminosity is essentially like perceived brightness, right? How bright does the color look? So mathematically, they're at 50%, all of the colors, but you can see yellow looks really light, while at 50%, blue already looks so dark, right? So it's like mathematically they're 50%, but they don't feel the same. And which is kind of the problem with colors. So there's this formula for perceived brightness, which I took from the same slides, which depends on RGB. So you can see R, G, and B have different weightage on how much they contribute to brightness, right? It's kind of derived from this. So if you look at blue, blue tends to go dark really fast, and yellow tends to go dark really slow. Or you should look at RGB. So there's RG, green is the one which is usually slower. So you kind of use their weightage accordingly, and you kind of get this formula, right? I didn't make this formula, but I like to follow it. And that kind of gets you to this place where colors like yellow, just because of the hue they have, when you try to like make them darker, they kind of become this grayish, brownish, not even brown, it's just like ugly grayish yellow, right? Which is not something you want. So when you're working with colors like this, you kind of have to make them, rotate them. So for example, this is kind of fading into orange and brown instead of its own yellow, right? So that's like one of the tricks. In Diana Monto's talk, she kind of talked about Rune Matson, who's done a lot of research on like how do you procedurally generate colors, which not just like are like basically this doesn't happen to them, but the second part happens. Like how do you use like what would be a good algorithm to generate colors that actually look good, right? And they scale for visuals and not for math. I've linked it in the notes here on this URL. If you want to research like math and color, you can go there. I honestly didn't understand much from that paper, but it's interesting. So what I like to do is I like to use this tool called Scale. It's by Hayek, and I've taken the JavaScript yellow here. So the center one is JavaScript yellow, and what this tool lets you do is like you can say, give me 4 colors on the left, 4 colors on the right, and you can see how this like if I just modify keep making it darker, it kind of gives me this ugly color. So what I can do is I can rotate the hue, right? I can make this go negative, which kind of goes into green, right? Or I can increase the hue, which kind of goes into red. So what I'm going to try to do, I'm going to rotate it like just a little so that it kind of goes into this orange brown thing. And this kind of becomes my yellow scale, where it's like if it's really dark, it goes into yellow, orange and brown land. Similarly, on the light side, I can also rotate it to make it go the other way. What I tried to do here is increase the saturation or decrease the saturation. Yeah, I decrease the saturation so that I get like slightly nicer shades here, right? So a lot of it still comes down to like, how do you pick color? But I feel like modifying these values that are actually math at least give me a mental model of like, how can I get a whole palette which is good, right? Or which at least like my taste thinks it's good. Let me show you another one. So for the Airbnb kind of site that I was creating, I needed that pink, right? So I took one pink that I thought was okay, and then I rotated by -5. So again, this part is still like hit and try, but I kind of was going for like a darker pink and a lighter pink shade so that I get like a whole scale. And my trick, this one is not backed by science, it's just like my personal trick, which is when I choose like the middle color, I try to choose what would the button be like. And if I put some text on the button, how dark or how light should it be to get like an accessible button, right? So that's how I choose the middle one so that it's still accessible. And then I tweak these values so that my lightest color can be the background for my darkest color, right? So if I'm making like an alert like this, you can see that, I use this lightest shade is the background of the alert and the darkest shade is the text. And in between, I get enough values then to use things like border, or if I have to use an icon or an underline, I kind of get enough, like hover states, I get enough values. So the lightest and the darkest, basically, I make sure that they create like an accessible contrast value so that I can use them. Lucky for us, we don't have to like create all of them on our own. There are a bunch of open source ones. So again, these are 3 that I liked. I linked them in the notes. and I use one of these as a starting point and tweak them until I found something that matched my liking. So how do you get this into React Land? So very similar to font sizes, you can create like a color object. So for example, you see I have all of my pinks here, and I've basically just taken the pinks from this one, right? And I've copy pasted each one of them into like a scale of 100 to 100. The nomenclature is this nomenclature was made popular by material design. The names don't matter. You really just need a scale and you can choose your own names for it. Let me show how that looks. Let's close this. Colors, okay, perfect. Let me render this block. Yeah, so you see I have all of my colors here, right? And how React UI, or how basically style system, the building blocks behind React UI, how they work is like you can give your CSS essentially, or the styles you give to your components are linked with your theme. So when I define these tokens, when I define like this is my pink set, I can use background color pink 100, pink 200, and they kind of read from the theme. So I can also change this to, let's say, grays, which I've already defined. And this is my gray palette, right? So now when I'm trying to build something, I'm not doing the color picker thing. I'm basically picking from, if I want it to be gray, I pick from one of these values. So I say background color gray 500. And if it feels too light, or if the contrast is not enough, then I bump it up or bump it down. So let's go back to our earlier example, because in this example, we can do something interesting. So so this part, the information that we try to like highlight less, it would be really cool if we could also use color to supplement it. So if I find, let me quickly find it. Yeah. So what's interesting about like the moment you're using JavaScript objects for defining your color system, you can also define decisions here, right? So I have the aliases essentially. So I have like a colors object over here, treat it like a config essentially. And then I can create my own variables here because they're all JavaScript objects. And I can say text has these 4, which is body, which takes a gray. There's a subtle, which takes like one shade lighter. And then I have link and link hover. So for example, in this color, in this text element, if I say color is text.body, right? Text.body is the default, of course. So text.subtle, you can see this color becomes a subtle color. And it's because it's picking from the JavaScript object of text.subtle, and then text.subtle actually points to gray 700. So once you basically define a small system like this, I'm never actually thinking about colors, right? I'm thinking about if it's secondary information, then it probably should be subtle. And then text component from React UI comes with a variant, which basically translates that. So you can say variant is subtle. So I'm looking at this information. I'm saying, okay, this is primary. This is secondary. So I'm going to make it subtle. I'm going to make it one size smaller. You can do the same thing with font weight. So I can say this weight is, let's say, semi-bold. I'm going to remove this one. Or maybe semi-bold is too much. Let's go to medium. I kind of like semi-bold more. So I'm going to stick to that. And then also make this subtle. Actually, subtle was a bad idea. I'm going to stick to this, right? So you see, like the speed of iteration in which you can try design things and then make your decisions on what looks good to you is really fast, because I'm not trying to like pick colors from the universe. I'm trying to pick colors from my set. And I know that this is how I can create the hierarchy. I hope that made sense. Okay, let's talk about space. Space is kind of like probably the most important one. And it's also the easiest one for at least me to understand. So if you look at this layout on the left, the sizes they're all even numbers, but they have their distances kind of different between each one of them. And like when you look at it, there doesn't seem like any clear vertical rhythm is what people call it, right? Which is another way of saying it doesn't look harmonious together. Versus on the right side, this thing is put on an 8-point grid, and all of the heights, are multiples of 8, and the space between them are also multiple of 8. And that instantly creates like this nice visual hierarchy. Another example is this one, where the padding here, the margin between these two elements, the margin between two elements, they're all multiples of 8. And then the height is also a multiple of 8. So just by picking values of size which are multiplied by 8, you kind of instantly get like a nicer rhythm to your application. So the multiplier could be anything. People use anything from like 4 pixels, 8 pixels, 5 pixels, 10 pixels, could be anything. For applications, I like to use 4 pixels because it gives me a little more fine-grained control. But if I'm working on a blog or like a documentation side where there's a lot more space, then I move to an 8-point scale for that. So React UI ships with a 4-point because you can get both from that. Let me show you how the space is defined. Oops, there's something in the chat. I hope I'm not interrupting. Okay. So space is kind of defined as a JavaScript object as well. And I try to define like 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. And first, and it's on a 4-point scale. So I say 0 is 0, 1 is 4, 2 is 8, 3 is 12, right? It's like a 4 multiplier going on. What this helps is like when I'm thinking of space, I don't think of how much space should it be in pixels or in rems. I think about like how many units of space do I want to give. So I don't know if I should keep the chat open because if I'm doing something wrong, then somebody can ask me. Okay. So if you look at this, actually, let me show you the example itself. That's nicer. Yeah. So you see, I have this stack, and like stack is a component that accepts gap. So it defines the gap between these components. And then I can increase them from 1 unit to 2 units, 2 units to 3 units. And just because they're consistent, they kind of keep the vertical rhythm. I'm going to keep it 1. What's interesting is like the image and the text seem really close by. So I can use something like margin bottom, or I can use a CSS prop and give it margin bottom is 1, right? Again, 1 doesn't mean 1 pixels. It means 1 unit on the scale, which is on the 4-point scale, it's 4 pixels. And if I don't think it's enough, I can make it 2. And now it's like 8 pixels, right? So I kind of like this more. I'm going to stick to it. Let me just try one more. It looks good. It probably feels a little too much. So I'm going to come back to 2. So again, the speed of iteration is really nice because you can just go up, 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 and down, down, down. And you're on a harmonious scale. So it's just like all my options look better than what I would do when I'm picking like 17, 18, 19 pixels from the dev tool. All right, back to this. So what else can we standardize, right? Like once I got into this mode where things can be on a scale, I wanted to know more, like what else can I put on a scale to make my life easy? So one thing I found from material design is that their animations are actually on a scale. So if we look at this one, this opens and closes in opens in 300 milliseconds, exits in 250 milliseconds. What's interesting is like the exit animation is faster than the entry, which makes sense because you want it to get out of your face faster, and the length of the animation is decided by how big is the size of the element. So for example, this one takes over the whole screen, so it has a bigger one as compared to this one, which is coming from just the corner. So this one is slightly faster. It's 250 entry and 200 exit. Compare that to a switch component, which is like really small, and it should feel really instant, right? You don't want to wait. You want it to feel instant. So they have 100 entry, 100 exit. And if you look at it, all of these are also like, the values they feel like they're on a scale, right? So I've tried to do this where the duration, you can put your durations also on a scale. So I basically took material design scale and put it here, which is like 100, 150, 200, 250. And let me show you the color example again. Because if you notice, the color example has this hover effect, where if I hover, the thing becomes slightly bigger. And it's coming from this swatch component where I basically scale 1.1, and then I have a transition duration. So transition duration, because it's a duration property, it will read from your duration scale. All of those are like internal mappings. And this, if I'm looking at this and this feels a little too slow, I can bump it down to 2 or maybe even 1. And this is like much more instant. But if I want to slow it down, I can like keep increasing to 5, right? A lot of things like animations are like, you have to use it, you have to look at it to see if it looks good, right? Like it's at least hard for me at least to like write code and then be able to visualize if this animation is going to look good, right? I have to try it, I have to play with it to make up my mind. And that's where like having a scale like this really helps, because I basically go up, up, down, down until it feels good to me. So given all of that, right? Like if you sum all of those things up, this is my process, building everything with scales with React UI. I'm going to play this video and tell you what's happening. So I use a bunch of components from React UI. And you can see I'm using like size and margin, all of those are on the scale. I'm using the form field. This is just like a tiny accessibility thing there, where the form field gives you a label which is accessible. I'm styling the form field. So you see I struggled here for a bit, where I tried font size 3, then tried font size 4. I like font size 4, then I want to make it all caps. So I did the text transform CSS. And now when it's big, I like, okay, this is too big. I'm going to tone it down to 3, right? So it's like the whole process is kind of still like it's hit and try. It's you design by looking at things, but it's a lot faster and a lot better because it's built on constraints. I put these two elements together and then tried to figure out how much space. So I tried a gap of 2, gap of 4. 4 looked too much. I came back to 2. I'm wrapping this whole thing in a card now. So, and then giving it a width. And then I tried to play with the width, but I also tried to make it stick to like something that is divisible by 4 so that it still stays in my, like I don't break the visual rhythm that I've got going. And wait, I can show this in code. Right, so this is what's going on. And then if you see here, like first of all, like I have my space, which I showed you, I have the same font sizes. I also defined all of my colors. And I've gone as far as like defining shadows from places I like. So like this is a smallest shadow, then bigger, bigger, bigger. I've defined my line height, my font weight. And then the components here, I would recommend like not to worry too much about the syntax, because like this is just a way of representing. The ideas are more valuable. So if you look at my input, I'm using color text body, and the placeholder is text subtle. And when you click it, you know, there's this blue hover that you see. And when you click it, like there's a darker blue, and all of these come from the blue scale. So I have like a hover blue 300, focus blue 500. I tried 4, I tried 5. Let me actually show you 4. Right, oops, reload. Right, so 3 and 4 had nice contrast, but it did not seem bright enough to me. So I tried like a brighter shade, and that really like caught my, this looked really good to me. So I stuck to it. Let me show you the button as well. Button is just above. So button is using background pink 700, the one we chose earlier. And then because we made that scale for us, there was enough room for like hover and focus styles in between the darker colors as well. So that's kind of one thing. You also see like the rhythm essentially is really, I mean, you can't see it here. Let me show you in a different place. There's an article on React UI. So this is the same field. And then you can see that this is what makes it look so good. Like when you look at this, it looks like somebody thought about it. But it looks good because all of the margins are essentially multiples of 8. So you see the label and input are 8 pixels apart. The heading and this are 16 pixels apart. The space between these fields is 16, right? The borders on the margins on the end are 32. And the inputs are 48, the button is 48. So you see everything is just like multiplied by 8. And that's like, at least for me as a developer, it was such a cheat code to kind of know how people can make decisions faster. And now, if you compare these two, right, this was the one I made earlier. This is the one I made now. There's a lot of difference, right? And I tried to like put a background behind it. And so check this out, like compare this to the initial result. Let me show it to you for contrast. Compare this, which is something I would usually do. Compare it to this, right? This looks designed. This looks like somebody knew what they were doing. And this looks like a website I might put my credit card in, right? Because it looks like it's designed. So I'm still not saying like this is perfect or this is really good, but the fact that it feels designed is already like a huge win for me, because that's something that I've always struggled with. So when I talk to my designers, right, and like I didn't come up with this on my own, of course, I came up with this like people I've worked with and asking them a lot of questions. So a lot of the designers that you work with, they already have like an invisible system in mind, right? So for example, if I ask them about how much space, how did you decide how much space to put? They've always said like, yeah, I always use this, right? So there's a lot of thing in like design theory or like that junior designers start with, and by the time they're like pro designers, it's just like part of their mental model that they don't even think about it anymore. So that's why it's like really difficult for them to explain it to me. But like I had to like poke them, go really far behind on like why designers do this. And this is kind of where all of it is coming from. So it's like every designer you work with already has like an invisible process like this, but just trying to take that invisible process and put it into code gave me like a really good mental model of like how I can code it. Yeah, I said like the where do you put the styles is totally up to you. If you put them in like a theme file, over here I've also put them in like a CSS prop on the form itself. Like I was trying to design this form label. It's totally up to you. I really wouldn't care so much about the syntax. In this case, the objects are just slightly nicer to interop with the theme. So if you find this useful, if you think like this gives you like a slight like introduction to like how you could design with just the right primitives, like having the right tools in your hands, then check out React UI. One of these is supposed to be a link. There you go. Yeah, you can go to the GitHub repo, or you can go to the domain, which is reactui.dev. And there's like getting started in core concepts. I really like, I don't mind if you don't use my library. That's not what this is about, but I really encourage you to like read the concepts behind it, because I think those are more valuable than the library. As I said, all the links for all the talks and articles I mentioned are on this URL. And thanks. I hope this was helpful. Jeff. Well, Kiran, you'll have to.
Yeah, awesome talk, Siddharth. Yeah, so if anyone has questions, maybe you can unmute and maybe ask questions.
Hey, Sid, this is Tanay. Great talk, by the way. I had a question when you're talking about rotating the color.
Yeah.
What do you mean by rotating? Design newbie didn't understand.
Okay, so if we go back to this example, actually, let me take this example. So when we're looking at something like, actually, let me show you the JavaScript yellow, because that's a very nicely broken example. So when you look at this color, right, when we use a color picker, most of the time what we're doing is we take this color, right, and then we're trying to find it, like make it darker like this. And you can see how it very quickly turns into this gray, ugly kind of color, right? So what, instead of that, if you move to HSL instead of RGB, you can see like when I increase the L, which is luminosity, it goes to the lighter shade. If I want to go to the other way, I decrease the luminosity, and you see it starts going into gray. So instead of just going gray, I can also increase the hue. So this H, the hue goes on a radial scale. So I think it goes from like 0 to 255 or something, or 180. I'm sorry, I don't know. I can find out by 0 to 360. Okay, so it's like a perfect circle, right? So that's why when somebody says that let's rotate the hue, what they basically mean is like rotating on the 360 angle. So for example, I can rotate it and you see it tends to green, or I can rotate it in the other direction and it goes to yellow. So now when I decrease the luminosity, I don't get an ugly grayish thing. I turn more into brown. Does that make sense?
It does. Thank you.
Yeah, I think I need like a proper radial kind of color picker to do a good job of explaining this.
Hello.
Hello.
Yeah, yes, Ed. I just want to know like some basics of the colors again. Okay. So the major problem with my company, like designers are like selected the RBG color as a, like the primary and secondary itself. So on the basis of logo, normally we find out like what should be the color palette of our sites. So I just want to understand, like most of the times, like designers comes with their own color code or something, and they want specific that color only. So I need to like put it as a customized way of like putting that color as a hard code value sometimes. Okay, which is really bad. I feel it. So that time the color palette, the way that you generated this doesn't comes in handy. So how can we?
Right. So a lot of times, if you like, so I kind of like came from the same, what do you say, experience as you, where I see a hex code and then I have no explanation of why this hex code is the right hex code, and it's just a code, right? And then when you're working with it, it feels arbitrary. So what I found to be really nice is like going back to the developer, going back to the designers and asking them, how do they pick their colors, right? And if you're working with like, I don't want to like throw shade on anyone, but if you're working with like an experienced designer, they don't do the color picker thing either. They usually have like a set of colors that they choose from, right? And they go up and down. So even if your developer application might only have 2 or 3 blues, they actually already might have 3 or 4 more options that they want to pick from. And so the examples that I showed you, it's really rare that you would actually need, where are my colors? It's really rare where you actually need like 9 shades of red, right? Or like 9 shades of yellow. So if I show you the, like my work, oh, this is cool. I can actually show you live code sandbox, sorry, GitHub. Right, so if I show you my color theme from work, we don't actually have all of the colors defined there. We only have a few colors. So we have 9 grays, but if you look at it, there are only like 3 red, and there are only 3 blues, right? And we only have like 1 green, purple, and yellow because we don't have use cases yet where we needed the whole scale.
Don't see your screen, Sid.
Oh,
you are not
shit.
sharing your screen.
Sorry, that is like Zoom mistake 101. Yeah, so this is like the code sandbox repo where I work in. And if you see the colors there, we have like 9 grays which we could identify, but there's only like few blues and few reds that we needed. And then there are things like green, purple, and yellow, which are just 1, because we essentially haven't hit those use cases where we need more than that. So a lot of times these are getting defined on the go. So for example, Danny, our designer, came up with these 3, but then we discovered we need a hover state. So we had to add something in between. And then it says Sid added this over here. So this is some color that we chose on the spot and then put it on the scale. So a lot of times it kind of goes back to, I think the difference has been like not asking the designer to give me a scale, but working with them to understand how do they pick colors and what's their invisible scale and putting that into code, right? And a lot of it is like, it develops as you do it with them. Does that, I know it's not like a very convincing answer, but that's kind of like the true answer. I wish like designers just gave you the whole palette and we could hard code it. But it's mostly like a iterative working with them kind of process.
Yeah, we're doing that only, and like we somehow like fix it out, the typography somehow like getting fixed out, but color is still not, we are not finalizing, or we are not in sync yet. So we are still to optimize that. Yeah, sure. I got you.
Yeah, color is really hard. So if you go to the talk by Diana Mounter on color, she talks about how GitHub changed their color, I think like 6 months ago. It's a great talk. Like color is really difficult. That's what I learned.
Okay, sure. Thanks, Sid.
Hey, Sid, I have a question. Hey, yeah, great talks. This was really in depth. Like I really like the concept behind choosing a color. One problem that I faced with my website was that there is never one single color. Like when you're looking at the theme of your website, you will have one primary color, one secondary color, and might be one tertiary color also, right? You might have a contrasting color, or you might have like a triangular thing, like, one primary and then 2 on the 2 ends of a triangle.
Right.
So how do you take care of that in React UI?
Okay, let me go back to my screen then. Cool. So a lot of the work that has gone in is kind of based on the theming. So if I go to the button component, right, you'll see that button is something that has a lot of variants, right? And you can actually define your variants. So if I go to button, yeah. Oh, not this button. I'm thinking of like, where should I open? Let me open like the default light theme of React UI. Yeah, so you see the button has like a bunch of variants, which has like a primary, and then it uses few shades of green to do the hover focus. Then there's a secondary, there's a destructive button, there's a link button. And then the alerts that I have like a default variant of warning, success, destructive, right? So every component that you look at, alert. Every component that you look at kind of has like a few, like, as you said, like secondary, tertiary, or like how I like to call them is like destructive and second, like the names are still as arbitrary. But then once you start defining them in this way, you kind of start finding the same patterns. So do I have another one? Okay, let me show you the last design system that I worked on. That has a better example. So alert. So you see this alert has the same warning, destructive. And then when you look at a badge, the badge also has the same matching colors, right? So it's essentially like, not only you come up with the color scale, you also come up with like primary, secondary is more like the decision layer, where you say, this is my destructive, on hover, this is how it changes. And then you try to use that across components. So if you think about like abstraction layers, there's the variables of colors, there's the decision of colors, and then there's the components that consume the decisions. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, it does. Although, yeah, I had some supplementary question around the theming of an application, but I'll take that off like after, like,
Right.
offline after all the sessions. Like that's an extension of this question, but this one definitely answers it. Yeah, thanks.
Yeah. Hi, Sid. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, Sid. Aakash here. Great talk about design system. It's really informative, and also good work with the React UI. I just went through it. It's really good. So I was talking to you something about typography and everything, how it revolves around it. So a few months back, I came across Tailwind CSS, and what in their documentation, what they mention is everything revolves around REMs, mostly relative units. So in production ready applications, if we are building it from scratch, if we have everything in control, is it better to go with REMs and relative units rather than using pixels or points? Because a few months back, what I encountered was I was developing a website on Mac, and it was looking perfectly fine with pixels and points. And then one fine day, my lead comes to me and he's like, "Hey, you know what? This looks very odd in my system." And okay. Then I looked into his system, and everything looks much bigger, right?
Yeah.
So does how much of a difference does it make when not only in the typography part, but as you said, the spacing between everything has a unit with 8 points and stuff, right? So again, how does it flow with everything?
Yeah. So I understand the question. So so when you define like and this is more like web what do you say, web compatibility stuff. So for example, if you define your values, I have to keep switching. When you define your values in pixels, right, it works very well if your base is also pixels. But then in browsers, you can actually redefine what your default font size should be, right? And it's like more like an accessibility feature where a lot of websites have small fonts. And if you can't really see well, which like will happen to all of us with age, you can bump up the font size, right? So I'm not saying control plus, control minus. You can also change the default font size of the browser. So when you look at font scale, you kind of have to pick like your default. So for example, when I talked about the scale, right, I picked 16 pixels as the default, and then I'm going up and down. What you can do with the browser is you can change this default. So when you change this to 18 or 20, then your scale also gets multiplied by that, right? So that's why I can hear myself. Hello. Somebody who has speakers on, can you mute yourself? Hello. Thank you so much. Yeah, so when you use 16 pixels, you kind of hard coding 2 pixels. So what's like the proper way to do this essentially would be if you define this as your body, right? If you go to body and say font size is 16, right? 16 pixels in unit, then this becomes 1 rem, right? And then you should define these not as 14, but more like 1 by 1.5 1 to 5, like whatever that value is, that becomes in rem, right? I think that's what Tailwind CSS also does. And I've had this conversation with Adam Baden, who's the author of Tailwind, where this is the right way to define, the values. Let me open this. Yeah, so these are the right way to define the values, but it's like a very hard way of working with the values, right? So the best way that I've come up with is basically you still define three, like you define them as 1 point, like 1, 2, 3, 4. Same goes for spacing, that you define them in the way that you can think, right? So I can think in the 4-point grid. I can't think in like 1.175 rem. But then you take this as 1 rem. So then you change this value. This would be 0.75, I guess, which is equal to 12 pixels, right? So first you define your scales in pixels, then you take the base value, convert it into rems, so that these values are always the one that the browser renders, but you're always thinking in pixel values. Does that make sense? There's like a difference between how you can think easily while designing and what the browser actually renders so that it stays accessible.
Okay, yeah, makes sense. So does the spacing and everything, or the grid layout also changes with the increase and the decrease in the size of pixels, or according to the browsers?
Yeah. Both, like the moment you use rem values, space, border radius, font size, like any unit that is in pixels or rems, it propagates everywhere.
So that is what the standard way of, the right way of approaching it.
Yeah, that's the accessible way of approaching this. It's like render rems in the browser and then create a system that you can think. Like I like to think in pixels, but then that should get converted to rems.
Yeah. So maybe it's better that we have a SAS mixin that could do it for us at a browser level, at a body level, and then we could use that in wherever the document we want.
I mean, if you're writing SAS, then yes. The way I like to do this is like I just have a scale. So then in the scale, instead of writing 14 pixels, I just write 0.825 rem.
Okay.
Right, and I'm still thinking still thinking pixels, but it's not what's getting rendered is in rems.
Yeah.
I should create a GitHub issue for that. Thanks.
Okay. Yeah. Sure.
Just to add one point here, like we can use a polished library also. Like it will, like you can still go ahead with the pixels, but while rendering you can get it a rem value. So it will convert your pixel value to rem directly.
Yeah. What's funny is that so it kind of comes down to like how do you want to author your styles versus how do you want to render your styles, right? So converting to like pixel to rem is you can use polished, you can use like just a tiny math formula, but what's key is that it goes into the rendering layers and not in the authoring layers, right? Like you shouldn't be thinking polished pixel to rem. You should hide it under an abstraction so that what gets rendered is different than what gets thought or authored.
Okay.
Okay, Sid. Do you want to hang out more on the front-end social channel?
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think we will move on to second talk in this channel, and I think Sid will hang out on front-end social room. So if you want to discuss directly and interact with Sid directly, you can hop onto that thing.
Yeah. If you have any questions, we can just like take this conversation there.
Yeah.
Can you paste the link again?
Yes. So I'll be pasting the link in the chat channel for everyone.
Thanks.
So if anyone want to continue the discussion with Sid, you can hop onto that. And in this channel, we'll move on to the second talk. And I think again, Sid will come back during the break so that, if you have any questions, you can continue that. Okay. Yeah. Abbas, are you ready?
Yeah.
Yeah. So maybe you can share your screen.
Sure. Which language here? What is visible right now? Empty Chrome, or I can't see.
Sorry?
Yeah, what is visible right now to you guys?
React.
Okay. Yeah, makes sense. Why can't I see it? 1 second. Okay. Can I see it myself? No.
Yeah, you should be able to.
Just thinking.
You shared your screen, right?
Yeah. And how do I see it myself? It kind of went away. Uh, just a minute. Let me stop sharing.
Okay.
Anyway, let me move it. Why is this happening? Okay, so I think now it should work. Yeah, it's visible now, right?
Yes.
Okay, cool. Hey everyone, hi, I'm Aakash. So I want to talk about React hooks and why hooks is not just about functions. So when you talk to anyone, right, and you ask them like, what is hooks about? Like, what is React hooks or what did you like about it? The common answer is that, hey, hooks is all about functions. Functions are great. That's the future. It's good for people, good for machines, and all of that, right? And maybe someone will talk a little bit about composition. So you can write some reusable logic which you can import in other components and use, right? So the reusable logic, and that's good. I think yeah, both function and reusable logic makes sense. But I think that hooks also made some of the other smaller features better. It gave us some small improvements compared to what we had in classes. So I kind of want to talk about the other things. What other ways did hooks help us, right? What was a little bit hard, a little bit frustrating with classes, and which is like slightly better with hooks. Okay, so we'll start with state slices. So everyone probably understands what a state slice is, right? So if you have written in a class component, you would write in a constructor something like this dot state equal to, and then you put like your state slices in there. So maybe if your class component is doing two things, right? Let's say it has two features. It is controlling a model and it is handling some kind of a form input, right? So then your state will contain two things like show model and maybe some selected value, right? So these are what we call or think of as state slices. Now, in class components, you have to create your whole state at a time and say what all slices are within it. But with hooks, you can create your states separately. So let's say now I have three features in my component. Let's say again, like model handling and form handling. Now my model handling code can do use state and create whatever state is required for its own functionalities, right? So it doesn't need to go to a common place like a constructor and add its own slice. Instead, it can create its own slice and update it whenever necessary. But with class components, all of the functionalities are kind of coupled at this point. So whenever you're creating your state, all the functionalities have to somehow come together and say that, hey, this is what my slice is going to be called, and this is what I want the initial value to be, right? So your functionalities basically cannot create the state separately in a class component. And the same thing kind of goes for updating your states. So whenever a functionality in a hook creates its own state using use state, let's say you do something like show model comma set show model equal to use state, right? So now whenever you want to update your show model, you can just call that set show model with true or false, right? So you can update it separately. But if you want to update your state with class components, you have to use set state. Now the thing about set state is that, maybe you want to only update your part of the slice, but it's very much possible that due to some bug, you end up changing the slice, which is, responsible for some other feature. So that set state is kind of global, right? Even though it merges your updates, you might end up changing the state for, another functionality. And the other part is something like this. Okay, so the code itself is not very important. What I'm trying to show is that, even though our set states are kind of atomic, I can say that set state with only show model, and it will merge with other states, right? I don't have to pass the whole state every time. But I think in class components, because I tend to think of the whole state as one big object, right? What we end up doing is something like this. So let's say this is a component will receive props, right? And here we're trying to check if the props changed in a certain way and then update the state accordingly. So let's say these two if conditions represent two functionalities, right? So this if condition is checking, if the props for a particular functionality has changed, then it wants to update the state for its own thing, and same thing for functionality 2, right? Now, ideally, what should happen is that these functionalities should do their own small set states. So maybe this thing should do its only, do its own set state, which should update just show X, right? But instead, what we end up doing a lot of times is, because we have that mental model of, state as a big object, what we end up doing is that we create a whole new state, right? Where we take maybe some of the old values. Then for each of the features, we modify this new, temporary state. So it will, modify the temporary state depending on the feature. And then we do one big set state. So effectively what we have done is that, instead of keeping our functionalities separate, instead of updating their own things, they're merging to some kind of a common thing and, doing a whole big set state. So your functionalities kind of tend to get coupled because they can't, easily create and manage their own states. And I think an extension of that is also state isolation. So think of it in this way, right? Because hooks are reusable, you are probably going to use some reusable hooks, from some third-party library, right? So there should be a guarantee now that, the hooks that you are using, they're not, their states are not going to collide with the states in your component. So for example, if your component has some state, right, they should be isolated from the states in the hooks. There should not be any chance where your component might end up modifying the hook state by mistake or vice versa, right? So I think, partial states and isolated states are kind of important to, have this kind of reusable logics. So, hooks is not just about function, state slices are also kind of important. The next small thing I want to talk about is derived variables, right? So like, what is a derived variable? Let's say something like this, okay? I have a props which contains data. So props.data, maybe that's like an array. And then I have some of my own data. So state.ownData. And I want to merge them together into one variable, let's say merge data, okay? So maybe for some reason, I want to work on an array, which is like a summation of something from the props and something from my own state, right? And then I want to use this merge data for everything else within my component. So, initially it's very easy. So let's say you need merge data for rendering. So within render, you just create a new merge data, which takes everything from props.data and then puts your own data into that same array, right? So you are basically creating that new array whenever you require it. And that's fine. You can use this in render if you want to, render all these elements, and that is going to work fine, right? But what if you need this merge data? What if you need this derived variable in other parts of your component? So let's say your component also going to have other methods, right? So your component has some other methods. It has some callbacks, right? it has some lifecycle methods. So you want to use the same merge data in other parts of your code, right? So one way is, of course, you copy this thing and paste it in all the methods. But that's not exactly a good idea, because now you're going to have a copy of the same array everywhere. And also, what if this merging logic changes later on? So what if you want to put your own data as the first element, maybe later, right? So ideally, okay, let's say if you want to share this merged data among multiple methods, what you can do is, of course, you can put it as a separate utility method, right? Get merged data. So now whichever method wants to use the merge data, they can basically call get merge data and use it, right? So this solves our availability problem. Now, whenever you need a derived variable, you can call this, and all your whole component now has access to your merge data. But there is still one small problem here, right? So whenever you call get merge data, you are creating a new array. So if there are 3 calls to get merge data, you are creating 3 arrays. So it's kind of a problem. So it's like a bit of an optimization problem, as well as this can cause a problem during checking. So let's say if you want to check the merge data between 2 renders. So if you want to see if merge data has changed between step 1 and step 2, then you can't really compare them directly, because it's creating a new array every time, right? So you want some way of memoizing it. You want some way of getting back the same merge data if your constituents have not changed, right? So, some so that this merge data gets memoized, right? Now there is no inbuilt construct for this in our class component, right? So what do we do? We're going to make sure that merge data updates only when my props or state has changed. Now, okay, maybe I can put this whole thing in component will update, right? In component will update, we get access to the next props and next state, and there we can check, okay, if anything has changed between my props and state, then only create this new value for this merge data, which is the new array, right? So we are effectively doing some kind of memoization ourselves by checking if props or state has changed, right? So now we have kind of solved the availability problem, because this is available on dis.merge data. You can access it anywhere. And also we have solved the memoization problem, where now if your constituents don't change, then merge data is also not going to be changed. So you'll get the same array back every time, right? But if you think of it, it was just too much work. I wanted to just have a memoized derived variable. So I wanted some variable which comes from 2 other things, right? And I wanted to memoize so that it's not changing every time. But there is no easy construct to do this in class component, right? So what I had to do is to go through all these hoops and see whichever I can, whichever case fulfills my requirement, and just do that, right? So of course, I mean, even other than all these ways, the official recommendation from React is to use something like a memoization library, right? So they suggest to use something like a memoize one, which gives you a derived variable from these 2 things. But then again, that's a third-party library. So if you are using it at work, so that's another big discussion around whether you want to introduce a new library or not. So effectively, all I'm trying to show is that with class components, having memoized variables is quite a lot of work, right? Having derived variables. But when you move to hooks, this is a very easy thing to do. So what you do is something like this, right? So earlier we are having this method which gives us a new array. Now what you do is you pass that function to use memo and say that these are my dependencies. So if my dependency changes, then call this function to give me a new merged data. And also because this is a function, so if you create this merged data near the top of your function, it's also available everywhere. You don't need to put this into something like this, right? So it's kind of gives us an easy way of having memoized variable in case of hooks. Now, Okay, so maybe we don't need derived variables a lot, right? But we'll see why that kind of matters in this section. So now I want to talk about the nastiest part of our component, right? So whenever I look at my class components, and there is this update life cycles which I just don't want to touch, right? So when I look at my component will receive props, that's like 80, 90 lines long, right? So I mean, I have all these props check. So I'll check, start with something like this. So I'll do if next props dot foo not equal to this props dot foo, and then write some code, right? And very quickly it turns into just a lot of code which is very hard to understand, why exactly we have written all this kind of code. So for example, this line of code within few days, right, turns into something like this. It turns into like this huge block of code where we are checking, okay, that if any of these variables change, then do this, or else if something else changed, then do something like this. So what I would like to do is, if anyone can unmute your mic and say that, okay, what is like a potential bug in this code, right? So is there any problem that you can easily see in this code? Like, can someone point it out?
Bars equals bars.
Yeah, so right, we are doing, double equals, right, instead of not equals. So again, when I look at a block of code like this, it's very hard to kind of see these problems intuitively, right?
Can we use the switch case?
Yeah.
Can we use the any switch case? Because not use the equals now.
Yeah, but how to use switch case here? I'm not sure, because you have to check if foo of next props not equal to this dot props dot foo, right? How do you use?
Okay.
I'm not sure how to use switch case here.
But there have any observer pattern means if any object values change, anything will any observing pattern is there. Any object value is changed, that object observer will come this type.
Yeah, maybe, but like that is not inbuilt to React, right? I mean, React directly doesn't give us that.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah. Also, can someone else point out some other problem? Let's say, okay, this part of our code is already fine. Can someone point out a problem with this if else kind of a pattern that you have
Condition
written
keep
here?
changing. We can keep adding more variables. Then we need to add it, keep modifying this code.
We need to keep modifying this code. Like for example,
Like if we add some conditions, some more variables or some more
yeah,
condition.
so we'll have to keep doing else if, right?
Yes.
Yeah, so that is one thing, correct. So this is like hard to maintain.
Hard
And
to maintain a testing.
yeah, testing, right? Anything else which can be like an actual bug in this code because of this else if thing. So we are basically saying that if any of these variables change, then do something, or else if this variable has changed, then do something else. Can something go wrong here? Depending on how your parent is doing stuff.
Yes, it might be that both of them changes. The if condition, if
Correct, exactly.
XYZ also changes. What goes first?
Yeah, exactly. What you said is right? So, as a child, you might be thinking that, either one of these will change or this thing will change, but you don't really know how parent is doing your change, right? For the parent, due to some implementation detail, both of them can end up changing at the same time, right? Then your else if code is not going to run. And even if, you think that logically both of them are not going to change at the same time, let's say even if you're controlling your parent, you still can't be sure, because React can decide to merge two updates in the parent, right? React can decide that, okay, if the parent is doing two set states, instead of having two updates, you effectively have one update. So depending on how your parent is, doing the props change, this might also cause some kind of a problem. So basically what I'm trying to show is that this looks like a normal piece of code. It doesn't look obviously wrong here, but it can cause some issues in some cases, right? So it feels like if I'm writing so much code and it can still cause some bugs, right? Why, there should be some kind of an inbuilt way from React, right? So that I can do this props check in a easier way, right? And then there is a third example, right? So let's say till now we are comparing each variable in our props separately. So you are checking if like props.foo change and props.bar change. But let's say if you want to check if props.foo plus bar has changed, so if the sum of two props variable has changed, then you want to run some code, right? Now, I already have this kind of a method in my component, get foo plus bar, which does like this dot props dot foo plus this dot props dot bar. So this I'm, let's say, using in other parts of my component. So this already works, right? Now I just want to use it in component will receive props. But as you can see, right, I can't do it. I mean, I have to somehow run this get foo plus bar with next props or previous props to check if things have changed. So suddenly now I have to go to my other utility methods in the component and change their definition to allow some custom set of props, right? This is, really, it's kind of feeling weird already. The utility method that already worked for me, right? I have to go back and change them just so that I can use them for checking my props, right? Why should, checking our props be so hard, right? So that's why the hooks way of using dependency array in use effect makes much more sense, right? So instead of us taking the previous prop and next props and comparing them manually, we just say that these are my dependencies. If the value of any of these things have changed, then run this effect. So for example, right, if you have even 4 or 5 properties that you want to check, you can just put them in this array. You don't have to write that repetitive kind of not equals equals every time. And same goes for our utility method. So if you have something like get foo plus bar, you can just call it here, right? Because your get foo plus bar only has to give the result for the current iteration, current round. And React will internally check if it checks changes between 2 rounds, right? So it's going to do a similar, equals check. And if those two things are different, then only run this effect, right? But now, of course, you might say that, well, when I'm doing my check myself, right, I have more power, I have more flexibility, I can do more things, right? And one of the common things that I have seen in my code where I'm not doing direct not equals equals, right, is when I have a props which is changing every time. Okay, so like if you look at this code, let's say this is within the child where we are comparing props.data array with previous and next props, right? So this can sometimes be problematic. So let's say if my parent has created a child like this, then my parent has passed this data array using this array literal, right? Then my props is going to change in every render. So this check is always going to give me false, right? Now, if you think of it, right, for the parent, it's doing, it's sending me a new array every time because it's just easy to do it, right? It can create a new array very easily and send it to the child. But for the child, now it's very hard to check if the array elements have actually changed or not. So it has to, either go through manually with all the elements, or it has to do something more expensive like JSON stringify. But the point is, this is also going to be hard if you use something like use effect, right? Because now you have to put your custom logic to check if your props have actually changed or not. So now if you actually look back, right, and if you look at this pattern where data array is changing every time, data array is giving you a new array every time from your parent, you can kind of understand why it is doing that, right? For the parent, this is the easier thing to do. In class component, if it has to cache this array, that's going to be very hard, right? And for the child, if it gets a new array every time, it's very hard to do that check. So what I think of it is like an incentive mismatch, right? So for the parent, it's easier to do one thing, which is to send a new array every time, but that is hard for the child. But if the parent does a little bit, if the parent writes a little bit more code, it can make sure that it is always passing in the same array. So the parent has to do more work, and now the child can do less work and get away with it, right? So this is the same problem as what we looked at during memoization. In case of class components, creating this new, caching this new array is very hard. But if you're using React hooks, right, you can use, pass this array to a use memo and then send that memoized array from the parent, so that this check becomes much more easier, and you can just use effect as normal. You can pass this array as one of the elements in use effect, right? So this I felt was one of the cases where we used custom checking with previous props and next props, but because you can memorize values now easily, so it's easier. You can just use effect and send memoized array from the parent. Now this of course has to be nested, right? So if your parent's parent is now sending a props which is changing every time, so it can cause like a cascading effect. So you have to make sure that from all the parents, it's always sending a cached value if things have not really changed. So the next part is that hooks makes like our life cycle much easier. So with class component, you have to write a similar code in all the lifecycle methods. So if you do like a API call in did mount, you have to again do a similar call in did update, right? So if any of your props have changed, then you might need to refetch your own data. And similarly, it goes for unmounting also, right? So I have ended up with a lot of cases in my code where I don't do proper cleanup. So what happens is, let's say you do kind of let's say you do a API call in did mount, right? But because it's not so easy to do in class components, you don't store a reference to some kind of a cancellation token, right? So ideally you should store some kind of a cancel method, and during unmount you should cancel all your API calls. Or if you are creating some kind of a timer, you should store your timer ID and clean that in your unmount. But I think we hardly do that, right? Same thing happens between your two updates. So if in one update you are making an API call, right, and then in the second update you are going to make a new API call for the same thing, you should clear your previous API call before doing the next one. But I think most of us hardly do that. The main reason is that it's hard to do that, right? If you create an API call in did mount, now you have to store a reference to that somehow in this dot something, right? And then later on in unmount, you have to use that this dot something and call it. And these are also two separate methods in different part of your code, right? So you tend to sort of forget to do these things, right? Because it feels like just so much work. You have to remember what you are creating in did mount, store it somewhere, and in again unmount you have to remember to clear all this stuff. And also, as you said, not just unmount, even between your two update cycles, you need to clear whatever is the effect that you created in the previous cycle, like previous update. So that's where I think the Mars lifecycle hooks or something like use effect or use layout effect makes these things much more simpler for hooks, because your same code will run for most of these things, right? So whatever you want to run in did mount and did update, you can write in the same place. And similarly, if you want to do the cleanup, it's also in the same place. So whenever you create an effect, you just specify the cleanup code just after that, right? So they are just co-located one by one. So it's easier, and it's easier to remember to clean up the things that you are doing during an effect. Now we all know how like use effect works, right? So I'm not going to go through like what are the parts of use effect, but what I think is sometimes helpful is this kind of a mental model. Okay, so what I'm trying to show here is that this green thing is like, let's say, your effect, and the red thing is your cleanup. So by default, if let's say your dependency array is empty in use effect, right, you are going to run your effect on mount, and the cleanup of this effect is going to run on unmount. So mount is always like your default effect, right? So mount is always going to run your effect, and unmount is always going to clean up your effect if you have like some cleanup code, right? And now what happens when I introduce a update in between, right? So you can see that there is this in this mental model, you can see already kind of this zigzag pattern appearing, right? So let's say now we have a new update, right? Okay, so let's say now when we have a new update, what it really means is that whichever effect code you run in mount, right? It gets cleaned before the next update. So let's say if this is round 1 and this is round 2, then the cleanup code for round 1 always runs before round 2. So, if that was the effect, this was the cleanup happening right here. So whenever you add more updates, you basically add this kind of a pattern. And similarly, whenever you create some effect in update 1, that will get now cleaned up in unmount, right? So whenever you run the next effect, the cleanup of the previous effect runs just before that. And we can extend sort of this same kind of thinking to other things. So let's say now your mount let's say your component is going through multiple updates, right? So this is like when it's causing first update, this is like when it's causing second update, right? Now when we put a few more elements in our dependency array, so let's say if we say that this update is because of props 1 changing, and this update is because of props 2 changing. And now let's say in our dependency array we say that use effect and run it only when props 2 changes. So what we are basically saying is that among all these updates, filter it down to just this update, right? So only take this peak, don't care about all the things happening in between, right? And then you are basically using your dependency array, you are filtering down this sort of zigzag pattern to the part that you want. And similarly, your cleanup always happens just before your next effect. So yeah. So the other thing I kind of think is that one of the differences, this is not really a practical difference maybe, but as a theoretical thing, right? So we always have some features. Every component has some features, right? It's going to do X, Y, Z, three things, and each feature is going to need a few life cycles. So each feature is going to probably need some state, is going to probably need to do something during update, and maybe during to do something during cleanup, right? So it's kind of a X into Y kind of a problem. You have X features which all need Y life cycles, right? So I think in case of React classes, what it did was it grouped by life cycle. So in React components, whenever we write something like component did mount, what you're basically saying is that, uh, for all the features, right, for all the things that you want to do, what all is going to run during mounting, right, or after mounting. But in case of hooks, what we tend to do is group by feature. So we tend to say that, okay, I don't care about what all is going to happen during update. What I care about is for this feature, what are the life cycle that we need? And can we write them together, right? Can you write the whole code in the same place? So I think this makes kind of more sense for how we think. So we humans kind of tend to think of things as features. So we need to look at, okay, what all is happening during this feature, instead of thinking of what all is happening during this life cycle. So this is probably closer to what the library will want to know. So React will probably want to know that what all do I need to rerun, or what all code do I need to execute when the mount is happening. So I think this is one of like the like the mental model where you say that in classes it used to be sort of grouped by life cycle, but now it's more like grouped by feature. At least it allows you to do something like this. And the last thing is that so even though a lot of things are like good about function components and hooks, right, one of the problems I have faced from time to time is organizing the parts within a function component. So I understand that we are supposed to refactor our function, right, into small hooks so that we can reuse it and make the function smaller. But there still tends to be a few sections within our function component which it's more like a scaffolding code, right? So you always start your function with function component with initializing. So you extract some props out of what you have got. Maybe you process your props a little bit to get whatever exact value you need. Then you initialize some of your own state. You initialize whatever custom hooks you need, right? So you do a lot of initialization code at the beginning, and then you think about, okay, what all updates am I going to handle? So what all use effects do I need to respond to, right? And then again, you are going to write about what all utility methods do I need here, right? So overall, what I'm trying to say is that we end up with a lot of scaffolding code in our function component, and I don't see a good way of grouping them together. So there is quite a bit of initialization code. There is quite a bit of where you create some methods, like you create use effects. You say what all callbacks do I need, and what all utility methods do I need. And then finally in render, maybe you create some partial renders. So you say that, okay, this is how I want to render my head, this is how I want to render my body, and then put them all together in the final return statement. So I feel like this is sometimes a little bit hard to organize, especially if you don't kind of demarcate your code into separate sections. So yeah, I would like to really get your thoughts on if you know of like a better way of organizing function components. So this is one of the problems I have faced while using it. So yeah, that's all from my side, and you can see more on this website, I guess.
Yeah, so I think we have 5 minutes for questions.
Okay.
Like if anyone has questions, you can maybe unmute and ask questions.
Thank you, Abbas. That was an excellent talk. So basically, my question is more of what happens if we try and create more functions. So when you say that how to organize a functional component, what if we end up creating more smaller functions which handle, let's say there is an initialization functions which is given, and it's a pure function which given the right input gives us initializes all the, like, let's say the first steps within all the initial hooks that we need, and it does that outside of this. Is that a possibility?
Okay, yeah. So you're suggesting that, okay, we make another maybe like a hook which returns all these values. Yeah. Yeah,
that might lead to overcrowding in some sense, because I think this way at least the code is easier to read for a developer who might be in a hurry and you're just solving this. As long as like the codes are demarcated the way that you have, which most often than not it kind of loses its space and we end up not doing so. Like especially with like, and we obviously don't tend to like write that here we are like initializing like the exact thing what we are doing, as opposed to it's more along the lines of what this code does, like what the following function does or what the following thing intends to do. So the demarcation becomes even more blurry because we won't write that here I'm initializing hooks. You might just write this hook is used for, let's say, mapping the cursor movements from here to here. And that way then you end up losing track of exactly which hook is derived from where. Is it a custom hook? Is it a hook that has been created within it? So yeah.
So yeah, I mean, what you said makes sense, that we can technically put it into a different function, but then that function wouldn't really have much of a sense, right? You're basically making a random function which exports all of these things. So yeah.
Do you feel like there are like right now, if you were to hop on a new project, so this is my like final question, is that would you still consider a class component as a useful entity to use in that? Is there a use case now that kind of presents itself or in these certain scenarios, I'd still prefer using a class component over a functional component?
So I think, yeah, I guess in general, I would prefer using function components because they have most of the features, and like us kind of trying to say that some of the things are easier to do. But I think there is only probably one use case about like component did error, which you currently cannot do with function components. But I think we still use it in very particular top level components. So I guess most of the cases I would still go for functional components.
Got it. Thank you.
Yeah, so we will start the next talk at 3:45. If you want to grab some water or take a short break, you can take it. And for the next 5-10 minutes, right, we can continue asking questions. It could be the questions related to Abbas talk, or it could be a general questions as well.
Sure.
And we'll start the next talk at 3:45. So So do you like to discuss anything other than the talks we currently have?
I would love to know like anybody who has worked on like currently or is currently working on a design system at a large scale. I know Siddharth's talk was all about that, but I joined a bit late. So my question kind of revolves around what's the entire process? What does it look like? Like whose initiative is it to begin the process? And what are who are the stakeholders that are involved in making the decisions when you guys decide, okay, we are building out a new project, let's say internal project, and within that we want to create a design system of our own, or we want to mod it on top of an existing design system, let's say Carbon or one of Siddharth's, or let's say some other design component. So who are the stakeholders that are involved in that particular discussion? That's my question.
Okay. Hi, this is Uday. I would like to answer that.
Yeah.
So whenever like we have been designing, like we have been working on a design system, like we team of 5 people have been working on a design system in our company. So usually the first and foremost stakeholders who come into existence are the UX designers, right? Because they until and unless they share a theming with you, or they share the like atoms and molecules with you, right? You can't design a component straight away. So the first and foremost thing in the process would be like get the theming right, and get the color schemes right. You may choose any existing UI component. You are not restricted to any UI components. You can choose semantic UI, or if you want to just go with Tailwind CSS or anything, any UI library. So once you get the theming and the color schemes, then you need to build atoms and like in front end we mostly follow atomic theory, right? We build tiny components called atoms, and we build molecules on top of them. So yeah, so your design system also should be a similar approach. You build buttons and all which you want based on the prop base. Like if you want a message of warning or success or info, right? You just simply send a prop and render them. But these specific components are very specific to a company level, because if you see different websites, they don't show same message. Like every company don't show you the same theme. They don't show you the same colors. They don't show the same messages, right?
Mm-hmm.
First and foremost, person should be involved as the UX designers, who will share the theme with you and who will give you the color schemes and the like color codings and components for the atoms. And after that, you can involve any of the front-end developers to build these atoms and build them into a package where you can reuse throughout the project.
So that like in extension to that question, so those are, let's say we can like group them and call them design tokens, right? So the theme, all the theme variables that we have, those are at a basic level design tokens. And once we have received the design token, so my question was more along lines of, so the reason I kind of mentioned the big company was because I find it like in ours, it is quite difficult to get, like if our components, they tend to get tied up to one particular application or one particular project because at atomic level, you are correct when you say that atomic level, it's easier to build as well because they are decoupled from most application behavior, I would say. Like but when you tend to like go a step above that, so let's say now there is a form, how does one go about then how do you guys, like you can answer in your specific case, how do you go about then making sure that this form, if you could call it a partial or a molecule, how would you go about making sure that this form molecule remains decoupled, and as well as when the time comes and if some team wants to independently develop up above it or on top of it, as opposed to changing it for every other team where like they probably don't need that feature. Let's say 4 teams don't need it and 1 team does need an extended feature. So how would you go about that, like tackling that problem?
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. This is a common problem actually faced across all the major companies, right? Because multiple teams keep working on multiple projects, but they want to use the same atomic level components. So my suggestion would be like reuse the atomic components and build a very basic molecule. It's like don't build exactly what you require, right? You can still extract what can be the common things in a molecule as well, and share the same molecule throughout the teams. And I think that should help.
Okay. But thank you so much.
Sure. Let's start with the talks then. We have like 3 more talks. Maybe Sagar, do you want to get started?
Sure, Kiran. Hi. Am I audible?
Yes.
Okay. Let me share my screen. Okay. I need to give permission. Just a minute. I'll add permissions to Zoom. Okay. It says I need to rejoin the Zoom. I'll be back in a minute. Am I audible now?
Yes.
Okay. I'm sharing my screen. Can you guys see my screen now?
Yes, it's visible.
Cool. Yeah. Let me start. So, hello everyone, good afternoon. I hope everyone is doing well. So today I'll be talking about building native mobile apps. So before I go into the talk, let me introduce myself so that you guys get in context on what I do. So I'm Sagar. I work at InMobi as a software engineer. As a day-to-day activity at my workplace, I usually work on React, Node, and GraphQL. So I don't work on mobile development on full time. So, but I always had curious to know about how the React natives are developed, and I also wanted to build one. So, a couple of weeks back, so since we all were in lockdown, a couple of weeks back, I thought I want to give it a try. So I built a mobile app and then published it on Android Play Store. So today I'll be sharing about how was the developer experience to work on a React Native from a web developer perspective, and how to get started with React Native. So in today's talk, I'll be sharing some approaches to build a native app, and we'll see some of the similarities and differences between React and React Native. And I hope that by end of this talk, you guys get some enough confidence to start building on the React Native. If you're someone who has not built a React Native mobile app, you can start with it by just going through this talk. So to build a mobile app, so what are the libraries of framework which we can pick? So to build a iOS app, we need to pick Swift or Objective-C programming languages. So with these 2 programming languages, you can build only app for iOS. And if you want to build an app for Android, you need to pick Java and Kotlin. So these 2 are the languages provided by Android. So React Native, Xamarin, and Flutter. So these are cross-platform libraries. That is, you can use a one code base to write the application for both Android platform as well as iOS. I'll be talking more about React Native in my further slides. So Flutter is Google's UI toolkit to build native user interfaces. It makes use of Dart programming languages, and Xamarin is based on .NET and C#. So why React Native is the best library for a web developers to start with? Firstly, it makes use of JavaScript. So as a web developer, most of the web developers would be aware how the JavaScript works, because they would have definitely worked with HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. And also a web developer don't have to learn a new programming language just to start with a mobile development. And just with the help of React Native, I can build an app which is completely native. That means the output of the React Native app will be same as what we build with the help of Java or Objective-C. And also some of the concepts around React Native are similar to what we have in the React components, what we use for web development. So it's easy for a web developer to grasp those components and start with it. And also learn once and write anywhere is the tagline from React Native website. So what they mean is you can write one code base that can be used for multiple platforms. So the React Native code along with Expo or just with the React Native, I can build an app for Android, iOS. I can run it on my web, and also I can build a desktop application with with the same code base. And React Native is popular. Some of the big popular companies like Facebook, Instagram, they also use React Native in their applications. So let's look at some of the similarities. So if you have worked with React.js, you know how the functional components work. You know, you would have built class-based components. You would have worked with hooks. So these are similar in React Native as well. The way how they work, the APIs, how they're supposed to work, the context APIs, everything remains the same. And also you can continue with the editor which you are working on React.js. You don't require any IDE to start with React Native. You can use the same prettier rules which you are following for web development. It's everything going to be remain same. So before I go with the differences, let's see how to set up a React Native app and Expo on our developer environment. So to start with React Native, you can just say npx React Native init awesome project. So this will install all the necessary packages to start the React application. And when you execute npx create native app native run iOS, so it's going to start the application on an iOS simulator. And if you say run -Android, it's going to start the application on an Android simulator. But this to run the app iOS on Android simulator, you need to install Xcode or you need to install Android Studio SDK. And setting up React Native on a simulator would take a long time. So it would consume at least about 2 hours because downloading Xcode would definitely take a long time. So there's one more SDK named as Expo. This is very popular in React Native development. So the setting up React app with Expo and on a physical device is very easy. It just takes about 15 minutes. You can just install this package Expo CLI globally, and then it just execute Expo init awesome project. So this will create an boilerplate for a project, and you can just start with the coding. So my suggestion is you can just start with the Expo and you can run it on your physical device. Simulator, Android simulator or iOS simulator is not required here. So let's see the differences between differences on how we create an component. So for example, on web, if you want to create a simple app component, you would import React from React package. You would create a function app, and you're going to return some JSX, a div, an image, and a paragraph within that. And you'll be exporting the app component. But on React Native, you'll be importing React, and along with you need to import necessary components that we get from the React Native package. And to return, you need to return view, image, and text. So on web, we have a div, but that is view is something similar how the div works. And image component is something similar how the img element works on web. And text is similar to how the paragraph works on the web. So how does this work? To render an image on an Android device, we need to make use of native image view Android SDK to get an image. And to get an image on iOS, we need to make use of UI image view from iOS UI toolkit. But when we use image in our code, what React Native does is it takes the image component based on the targeted environment where it's supposed to run. It's going to bind the image to that particular API. So for example, when it is running on the Android, the image is converted to bind to image view, and that's how an image is rendered on an Android device natively. And similarly, when image is targeted for an iOS device, so image component is binded to UI image view, and image will be rendered in a natively on iOS device. So handling touches. So on web, we have event listeners like on click, on change. And we can use that pretty much on any kind of tags. Like on div, you can have an on-click event handler. Even on paragraph or an image also, you can have an on-click handler. But that's not the case in React Native. So let's say I'm using a view component here, and I'm passing an on-press prop here and trying to console log when the user taps on this particular view. But this is going to throw error. We cannot have on-press, we cannot pass on-press prop to any of the components. So on-press prop can be passed only to the touchable components. So by the touchable components, there are something like touchable opacity, touchable highlight, touchable without feedback. So we can import touchable opacity from React Native, and we need to wrap the entire view with the touchable opacity. And for touchable opacity, you can have on-press event handler. So this is one of the difference between the web and how the React Native works. We need to make sure is this prop is supported by that component. Only then we can move ahead. Let's see about how the stylings are done. At an eye level, the stylings follow the similar pattern on how we do for the web. We need to import style sheet from React Native, and all the stylings are done inline. We don't create any class names, classes to add the styles. So let's say I have a view component here, and if I want to add some background color to it, I would just pass a style prop to it. And with the help of style sheet, I would create an object, naming it container, and I'm using the CSS prop that is background color, and I'm saying the background color should be teal. And this style sheet object name, that is the container, I'll be just using it in my view component, and the background of this view will be set to teal background. So let's say if you want to have multiple styles on a single component, you can just pass them as an array, like first style and the style sort a second style, and that can be wrapped in an array, and you can apply the styling in this way. And in React Native, there are a few special properties. So let's say if you want to have an padding left, padding right, if you need to get some margin top and margin bottom, you can, this approach also definitely work, but there are some special properties where you can club the padding left and padding right, and you can name them as padding horizontal. And you can club the top and bottom, and you can just make it margin vertical. So here, the output of this and the approach one, both going to be remain the same. And if you're work with style components on web, and if you're familiar with it, and if you want to like to use it in React Native also, yes, React Native provides a style components package as well. So on the web, you would import style from style components, and this would be the way you'd be using it. But in the on React Native, so you'll be just saying styled view, and you can apply your background color there. And playground. So on web, you might have used tools like CodePen or Code Sandbox, where you want to play around with something, want to prototype something very quickly. You don't have to install any packages or something. If you want to quickly dive into coding and do something, you can make use of CodePen or Code Sandbox. Similarly, on React Native, we have a tool called as Snack, built by Expo. So where this provides a user interface, something similar to Code Sandbox, and works similar to how the Code Sandbox works. You can install packages, you can do something, and you can get the output. You'll get the output of how it would look on an Android device or an output on an iOS or a web device, just right to the screen. Okay, so let's see how the debugging is done on React Native apps. Okay, so this is my mobile screen. So I'll be showing how to debug a React Native app in my developer environment. To run the app locally on my physical device, we need to install this app called as Expo, which we get from Play Store. So when you do that and you get this user interface, in your terminal, you need to say where your project is installed. You need to say Expo start. So when you execute this Expo start command, it's going to start the Expo server, and you get a kind of a QR code, something similar to this. And this window will be open by default. And you can see a QR code here, and this makes so what React Native does is it makes use of React Metro bundler from a proprietary bundler from Facebook. So that's the one which is going to take our code and bundle it and give us the JavaScript output. So we get the QR code here. We need to scan them from our device. So I'll say scan QR code, and I'll be scanning this QR code. So yeah, once you scan the code, your app will start working. So let's say if I want to debug any of these things, so this is the outshots, the recent app which I developed and published it on Play Store. So to debug this application, I need to, so to get, just like how we have developer tools on Google Chrome or any other browsers, we get developer tools within the Expo SDK itself. So to open the developer tools, I just need to shake my phone. I get these options. So at the bottom, I can see that, okay, show the inspector, and I can tap on this elements. So it will just give me, and on the top, you can see this, what's the height, what's the margin top, what's the padding I've given to this particular component. And I can click on image, I can see what's the height and width I've given for this particular image. And yeah, similarly, you get this CSS box model where you can, something similar on WoW you get on web, where you can get an idea what's the padding and margin. And also on the left-hand side, you can see all the CSS properties which I've applied for that component. So this comes under inspect tab. So let's say within an app, there'll be so many touchable components, like, I mean, which all components you can tap on the UI. So for that, I need to go on touchables. And also you can see the warnings at the bottom. If you look at this, it says warning, each child in a list should have a unique key. So this is because I'm rendering a list here and I'm not passing the key prop. So you get the same error on web development as well. If you don't pass a key prop when you are mapping over something, React would throw an error saying that you need to add a key to optimize the way how it is supposed to work. So yeah, so regarding touchables, so you can see that the card design has something, a teal kind of border. So that indicates that, okay, these are the components which can be touched. And also on the bottom navigation, you can see a maroon kind of border, which says that, okay, these are the touchable components. So that means if I touch on that, it will go to a new screen where again, it shows what are all the other touchable components. And those will be highlighted, like here the back arrow is highlighted with pink because that's an touchable component. So I'll go to the back screen. Okay, so let's see the network tab here. So you can even do the network debugging, like what kind of API requests you are doing, what's the response you're getting. So I go to the network tab, I'll just pull the screen down so that I make an API call. So we can see here what's the URI which is being it and what kind of request it was. So the type, it was an HTTP request, and method was a GET request, and the URL is something like infinite lowlands. So that is where that's where my Node app is running, and it is deployed on Heroku. And I'm asking, like, give me the headlines for the country India, and I can also see the request address which is being sent, and also I can see the response as well. So this is one way to debug the response. If you want, you can even console log them in your code so that you can see them in your dev console. And yeah, similarly, if you make any multiple API calls, so all those will be listed here, and you can debug on how it's going to, what's the response, or if anything is going on, you can check that. And I'll just reload this app again. So every time you reload, the JavaScript bundle will be downloaded. It just takes a few seconds. Okay. So yeah, so initially in my previous slides, I had mentioned that you can write a code and you can use it on multiple platforms. So I just took this as one of the examples. So have a search screen here. It just has an header, a search input box, and an image. So what I did is I just took the entire React Native code, which is used for this particular screen. So and actually I have a Gatsby website. So actually took the entire code and pasted in one of my pages, and this is the output which I'm getting. So this, and also this is responsive, since each and every element in React Native, they make use of display flex property. By default, all the properties will have flex. So that's why all of these components are the web page is responsive apps as well. And just to look at the code, have this. So in my Gatsby website, I just created a new page named as React Native Components. I just took the entire code that is React, and I'm importing from all this image tag, text, style sheet, input text. I'm importing from React Native. I'm making use of a plugin called as Expo Gatsby plugin, which will take this run the bundler and get the code which is supposed to run on the web. So even if I inspect this, I can see all divs and images which are as expected. So in my code, I make use of view, image, text components from the React Native. But when it is running on the web, it's going to take those components and bind them to the environment where it's supposed to run. So here it is web, so it is using the div tags in place of all the views and input tags in place of wherever I need input. So this is about one way of debugging the application. And so we can do remote debugging as well. So let's say one of the options we get is a debug remote.js. So when I click on debug remote.js, it's going to open a new tab, yeah, on my Google Chrome, and I can see all the logs which are which I have logged in my code. So I just logged app loaded. I can see that in my Google Chrome console. So this, you can make use of this tool as well to debug your mobile apps. And so there's also one more tool called as React Dev Tools. So if you want to debug your components, like to see what kind of prop is being passed, what is the state of that component, you can also make use of React Dev Tools. So this you can even debug the React Native mobile applications. And I mentioned that for my application, the one which I recently built, I made use of Expo SDK. So one advantage with Expo is that it provides so many things out of the box. You don't have to spend more time on setting up the APIs which are required. Like for example, my application makes use of push notifications, Google authentication, and few other things. So to build that from the scratch or just with the help of plain React Native, it would have taken more time for me to do those setup and build those components. But what Expo does is it provides a neat APIs, a simple APIs where you can just install them and start building them. And this is one of the app built by a developer from Expo community. It's called as ER Cutpaste. So what he actually does is, and this he has built using Expo SDK. So from an image, from a camera, it just picks an object and pastes it on his laptop. So this is pretty cool. It's not that Expo with a React and Expo, you can pretty much do anything. It's not that you're restricted to do with text and images. You can pretty much build anything. So that's the power of Expo and React Native and Expo. So yeah, with this, I would like to end my talk. So if you have any question, you can ask me.
Sure.
Yeah.
Hey, I have a question.
Yeah.
Hi, yeah, sorry, yeah, thanks. Sagar, yeah, really nice talk. I have one question about Expo. So I've been using React Native in one of my projects. One real big problem that I face is with auth logins into Facebook and Google and all. So have you tried that, and how has that worked for you? Like any social auth on Expo?
Sure, let me show that to you. I have my application on Play Store and it makes use of Google Auth. So just to keep it simple, I went with the Google Auth. Yeah, we have pretty much integration with some 12 different vendors. Like you can log in with Twitter, Reddit, any other things. So I'll just show you how I built a Google login. So this is my production app, the Outcharts. So it just shows a splash screen. Let me log out. So yeah, I just added a button, Google sign in with Google. Just on click of that, it's going to open a web view of where I can just select through which account I can log in. I would just select my account and I'll be automatically logged in. And also I'll be getting all the details of that user, like what's the username, what's their profile picture, and the image would look at, and just I'm displaying it in the profile tab. And yeah, what I just showed is something with a web view, like not exactly a web view, kind of a web behavior is there. But in the latest version of Expo, they've actually released a native behavior also. Like if you click on Google, sign in with Google, you would get a small pop-up where you can just provide your account name and that's how you will be logged in. So I think the integration with the auth is very simple with if we go with React Native and the Expo.
Okay. And is there any issue with upgrading to the latest version of the SDK with Expo? I think I faced that also.
Yes, even I've been facing that. So I built this app some 3 weeks back, and I was actually trying to run the Google login locally today morning, and it was telling that okay, your SDK package version is already deprecated. You have to use the new one. So I think the Expo team releases the new SDK every quarterly. So I think we come across this situations where we need to keep upgrading our packages, and also we need to refactor some of the code to support the new APIs.
Okay. Yeah, because that's one problem that I face, that I have to keep upgrading my Expo SDK every time.
Right.
But yeah, maybe I should do that, and then I'll be in sync with their requirements. Yeah. Thanks for the talk.
Yeah, thank you. I'll stop sharing my screen.
Hi, Sagar.
Yes, Puneet. Hi.
Great talk. Just wanted to know, like I read some article, like now we can have same code for React Web and React Native also. We can have a same code base and we can deploy it to web and code. So can you share your thought?
Sure. So actually in my presentation, in this page, I'll share this link. So at the bottom, somewhere in the links I've mentioned that like there's a person named Hivan. He's from the Expo team. So he'll be actually demoing how to build an app for 6 platforms at the same time. I'll paste this link on the chat so that you can refer this YouTube video. Yes, it is with the help of React Native, right? So we'll be building, it's just about the adding the bundler or the compiler. So you can write your code in React Native based on the platform where you're supposed to run. You would make use of that bundler or compiler, and you say that, okay, this kind of components from React Native should bind to that particular native element on that particular platform. And that's how, with the help of React Native, they can build application for various platforms. Let me put this link in chat.
And does big organization use React Native, or do they go for native development for Android and iOS?
It depends on the use case. As I said, it's not that Android can do something with Java or Kotlin, we can do something which is not completely possible in React Native. It is possible, but it just takes some time. So let's say if tomorrow Google or Apple releases a new API to their phone, something like getting the room temperature just by where your phone is kept, you may not get those kind of APIs immediately on React Native. It will just take some time to come to the React Native, but those APIs will be provided directly to the Java and the Objective-C, those platforms to those SDKs. So it just takes some time to come to the React Native because it's a community, it's an open source, and someone from the community needs to build a component or an API to work with that native API in an easy way.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, Sagar. Shubham here.
Hi, Shubham.
Yeah, great talk. So I just want to ask, like, will there be any difference in performance as compared to the native applications?
I think there was few performance issues previously, but I think React Native recently, not recently, maybe some time back, they started using a JavaScript engine for React Native. They named it as Hermes. I think with that I think with this, there's no much performance issues. So the behavior and the look and feel going to be almost similar to how the native application is going to work.
Okay. And have you tried out Flutter? Like,
No.
Is it similar to what React Native is? Is there any performance
Yeah.
benefit
So
if you
just
switch to Flutter?
Okay, just an eye level, yeah, I've seen other Flutter developers have developed some apps. So I felt the UI animations, something to do with UI toolkit's very pretty cool. Just that it's on a different programming language, so I need to learn Dart to start with a Flutter. So that's it would take its own learning curve, and that's the reason I didn't pick Flutter. But yeah, definitely, Flutter will also be a good framework to build native applications.
I haven't gave it a try, but I have heard that that is like pretty similar to like JavaScript. Like the
Uh,
syntax is like similar to JS.
Okay,
And
probably, yeah, even I need to check it out. I've seen the Dart programming. I didn't feel like it's very much similar to how the React works, like functional components or with managing the states, context API, lifecycle methods. I don't think these are present there, but yeah, I need to still check it out, how that works.
okay,
Hi,
cool.
Sagar.
And
Hi.
Yeah. Santosh here. Just a quick question.
Yeah, Santosh.
Yeah. So probably somebody might have already asked this, but I joined just now, so just wanted to clear this thing. So I was exploring Flutter a few days ago because somebody told me that Flutter is very much updated with the plugins and APIs and everything. While in React Native, there is a lot of problems in updating the plugins and everything, and it is still somewhat uh, painful as compared to the Flutter. And Flutter is seen as more sort of a clean, etc. So I heard you telling that you have not explored Flutter yet. You are yet to learn Dart. So I too have not. Okay. So the thing is, what do you think? So React Native, uh, you can write it once and deploy it everywhere, or is it like you had to write a separate code for iOS and then for Android and then for Windows Phone?
Okay, so yeah, to answer the first question, yeah, the API, some of the APIs on Flutter will be easy to use, and they provide the latest API. The reason being, the Flutter is backed by Google, so those guys have built the Flutter live SDK, and also the Google, what they do, if they're releasing some APIs for their Android, they make sure that they release it for Flutter also, because they are maintaining these two frameworks. So that's the reason why Flutter may provide some of the APIs much earlier compared to what we get in React Native. In React Native, we may get little late. And for the second question, yes, with a React Native code, you can just write a React Native code, and you can execute that on any kind of environment platform we are supposed to run. So as I mentioned, like it will take the React code. So we pass it to the bundler or a compiler. It binds those native elements to the platform specific native elements. And that's how we generate the APK for Android devices and web JS bundles for the web browsers. And they can make use of Electron package to generate the Electron code, and you can just have a one code base and run it on various platforms. You don't have to
Perfect.
write a separate set of code for different platforms.
Okay, perfect. That sounds great, Sagar. Thank you so much.
Hi, Sagar. This is Sham. I have a query regarding a canvas. Like, can we use something related to canvas in React Native?
Something related to Canvas in React Native. I need to check it out. So actually, you can just React Native as a React Native directory. So it will tell what all APIs it provides. If you want to do something with augmented reality, virtual reality, or some APIs, I think you can just check this directory before starting your project, so that you get an idea, can this be built using React Native? If not, I think there'll be some developers working on building that kind of package, and that can be added to React Native.
Okay. Okay, got it. Thanks.
Okay. So I've seen applications where you can make use of WebGL within React Native applications apps.
Right.
Hi, Sagar.
Hi,
Sagar. Yeah.
Okay. So I'm like, I could connect with you very much because I'm also not into web, mobile development, but I started exploring more, and I started building an application, and it's almost production ready. And I'm a little confused with the configurations, because I have different configuration for production and different configuration for development, because it connects to different server and database settings and all those things. Did you did you had a similar experience before you moved your application to production? How did you handle that?
Okay, so yeah, I'm just maintaining a config file to get all the configurations which are required to the application. So I'm not adding any configuration API keys within my code itself. I'm just making a separate config file. So based on the target where I want to run, so if I'm supposed to run on developer environment, I just include that config. And if I'm doing a production build, to deploy it on Play Store or somewhere, then I just change the config. That's it. So by this, I don't have to replace the config keys or API keys in my application code.
Okay, so your like info plist or Gradle files pick the values from that config file?
Actually, for my development purpose, I made use of Expo, so I won't be having access to Gradle or other things. So I just maintain. I just maintain a simple JavaScript file. You can just have a kind of a maintain a JS file or a config file, or you can even just keep a copy in your local environment. And based on when you're running, you can just say import that, and from that config you can import and execute.
Okay. Okay. Cool. Thanks.
Hi, Sagar. Actually, I have more questions for you, mostly regarding using third-party libraries. But maybe you can take it on the breakout session.
Sure.
Yes, yeah. So I put the link in the everyone chat. So if you want to discuss more about this React Native apps with Sagar, maybe you can jump onto the channel and discuss with him. Meanwhile, we'll continue with the rest of the talks in this channel.
Sure. Thanks everyone.
Okay. Yeah. So Uday, maybe you can share your screen.
Yeah. Hi. I have just one question to Sagar. So can you please tell me how you are debugging that things?
Sorry.
I have just one question. How you are debugging in React Native? Can you please show me that screen? Means inspect element.
Also, just to add on, in the latest version of React Native, they have introduced Flipper, the debugging tool. So you don't need an external React dev tools, which is almost similar. So it's already useful. It's almost similar to DevTools, but it's inbuilt inside the React Native itself.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Sure. Sagar, you can jump onto the link which I provided. Maybe some folks might join there and ask you more questions. Uday, yeah, you can share your screen.
Am I audible? Hello.
Yes, you are audible. Can you share your screen?
Yeah. Okay. The screen is visible, right?
Yes.
Hi guys, I hope everyone is safe and doing great during this quarantine. And kudos to the previous 3 speakers who did very well and added more pressure on me because my slides are not as good as their slides. But they are like good enough to give some data. That's it. So yeah, we'll be discussing about Webpack internals and plugin architecture system. So we have been using Webpack for a while, and this talk is not just for the people who are using React or Vue or something. This is for everyone who is into front end. So before jumping into it, let's see a bit about myself. I love JavaScript and coffee. When I say coffee, it's not script. It's just a hot coffee. That's it. And I work as a lead software engineer at Moengage. And yeah, I'm a tech speaker. I speak in meetups and conferences, and I'm an open source contributor as well, contributing to a couple of projects. You can follow me in Twitter, or you can view my projects in GitHub to get the updated things. Okay, so yeah, what do we discuss about Webpack? I noted out like 6 things how to set up. Like people usually have these questions, like how do we set up a Webpack, and what's the difference in Webpack like versions 4, 5? What is Webpack 5 module federation? In the recent times, this has been like a buzzword. People ask me what is like difference between Webpack parcel and gulp, grunt, and what should we do and what should we not do in the Webpack config. So yeah, these are the 6 topics which we will not discuss about. Yeah, I might sound crazy, but today's discussion will not be on any of these topics. It will be purely on Webpack, how Webpack works, So now after giving those 6 topics and saying I won't discuss about these topics, then the first thing that come to your mind is like, yeah, I'm crazy. Let's see what we got to discuss. Yeah, so when I say like there's nothing to discuss, right? Because I've already covered the 6 topics, which are the usual topics, and I'm telling you I'm not going to discuss that. Then what are we going to discuss? Okay, so yeah, we'll just discuss the internals of Webpack and how actually Webpack works rather than how to set up a Webpack, because I think there are a couple of good examples and talks which do that already. So yeah, these are the some of the things which we usually use in code like ES6, React, JSX, like Emotion, Sass, Angular, a lot of things. We use Vue and all. I didn't add too many things, but yeah. So these are few things which we code. These help us in making our code much easier and it's more developer friendly, right? But what happens if you build a project on this, you build a very complex project on this, and you try to run it on the browser? Usually, right, like browser doesn't understand React, browser doesn't understand Angular, browser like understands only this pretty minified bundle. That's it. It doesn't understand anything else. It understands simple JS, HTML, and CSS. Yeah, so whenever you pass these frameworks to a browser, right, it will obviously like react like this. Like, what the hell is wrong with you? Like, why are you even giving me this? It expects you to just give a very simple kind of bundle like this. Like, it expects you to give a minified JS files instead of giving you these things. Yeah, so now the question comes like, yeah, we are using a lot of frameworks, we are using a lot of things. Then how do we resolve this complexity and how do we make our code compatible to the browser? So the solution for this is Webpack. I don't say there's the only solution. There are a lot of solutions for this. You can use Parse, Gulp, Grunt. You can write your own module bundler as well if you're good at like data structures and tree parsing. Then you can build your own dependency graph as well. So yeah, let's look into the Webpack because this is like a package which is used by a lot of people. So I thought like it would be great if we can dig deeper into Webpack. So what usually Webpack does, when I say Webpack, right, everyone might have used like they just give some entry files and they pass it through Webpack and the output is a minified bundle. So are you guys following me? Because I think, okay. So it takes a set of files, it bundles it and gives you a minified bundle min.js, and it also gives you a map files. So you can map, you get a map to the bundle. So this is a general overview of Webpack, which actually works, how it works. So what we have discussed in Webpack so far is Webpack is a module bundler as we know, and Webpack generates chunks as we know. So how it bundles the code and generate chunk is it creates a dependency graph and resolves it. So there's a very general overview of what we have been seeing throughout the years, right? Like how Webpack work and what actually Webpack does. Yeah, but what I feel is this is not all about Webpack that we should know. Like there's a lot of things happening behind the scenes which we should be knowing about, rather than just knowing Webpack as a module bundler and like a chunk provider. So let's see how actually Webpack works in these scenarios. Just say you have a like set of files. You have JS, TS, JSX, and you have a lot of files, right? CSS and all. So you give a file with index.js as entry, or you can give as a HTML file as entry. You can give multiple entry points, but to keep things simple, I'll take a single JS file as the entry point. Then what we do is we send this entry point to Webpack. Now what Webpack does is it creates a dependency graph, like what all dependencies is your code using. It can be a npm module or it can be a different file as well. If you see, my index.js is dependent on the my component, like it's a component, and it's also dependent on React, it's also dependent on Lodash. So it creates a dependency graph so that it can find out what all things it requires to bundle rather than bundling everything, right? Because at the end of the day, optimizations comes to the play. Then what happens is Webpack creates something called a abstract syntax tree from the dependency graph. Like abstract, we'll discuss about what is abstract syntax tree in detail in the coming slides. So Webpack creates a AST so that it has all the code together with it, and it's already linking the code which is required. And finally, it generates bundles, a series of bundles. Like this is a simple image of a Webpack bundle analyzer, which shows you like what all are the chunk sizes and what are the sizes of the bundles are. So this is a very general overview, like how Webpack works. Again, if you go right, it takes an entry point, it creates a dependency graph, like it again it creates a abstract syntax tree of the complete dependency graph, and then it generates bundles. So it's very simple, right? So when I say Webpack, like everyone might have used Webpack plugins. It's like everyone uses like a lot of plugins, right? We have plugin for every simple thing that we can do, for progress, for loader, for loading screens, and we have plugins for generating HTML Webpack plugin. We have plugin again to inject a root into that HTML. We have a lot of plugins. So Webpack, what I feel is it's all about plugins and resolvers. So if you see this, we have a set of loaders and plugins which are like most commonly used. Few might be deprecated and few might be there. Where the context of this talk would be more of how Webpack works rather than what things are deprecated from Webpack V2 to V5 or V4. So let's see a general overview how actually Webpack works. So if you see, these are some set of plugins to minify the JS code, to create HTML, to split your code, and you have few loaders, transpile ES6 to ES5 or ES7 to ES5, and you have image loaders, URL loaders, file loaders, and a lot, right? You have style loaders, CSS loaders, you have loaders for everything. So what in general these loaders do is they take these set of files which usually write a test, like you usually do take this specific file with this specific extension, load it in the form of a JS module. Because what Webpack understands is it at the end of the day, it gives you a set of JS modules, right? So Webpack's intention would be create some modules. So that's the reason you load other format files with a loader, and loader's work is to create JS modules. Yeah, now can anyone, whoever has worked on like Tap Pebble or heard about it earlier, anyone can unmute their mic and just say like, what is Tap Pebble? If anyone has worked on it. Okay. Or you can actually raise your hand as well. That should be fine. Okay. So tappable is actually, when I say Webpack is Webpack consists of plugins and loaders, right? So Webpack gives you flexibility to add any kind of plugin that you want. Like Webpack allows you to add plugin for any purpose. So tappable is a library. It's a very 200 lines or 230 lines of library, which gives you a plugin system in Webpack. It gives you a plugin support in Webpack where you can directly write plugins on top of Webpack. If you want to do anything, right? When I said like HTML Webpack plugin, it is used to generate HTML from a template. So you're giving that support to Webpack through this plugin. These are very similar to event emitters in Node. If someone has worked on like Node.js, right? We have event emitters in Node. So you can listen on to any event and you can pass a callback saying whenever this event is emitted, do this. So this is how actually Tappable works in case of Webpack. So Tappable has a lot of instances, but I would actually concentrate more on these instances, which are very specific to Webpack. Like you have around these 6 instances, like you have compiler, compilation, resolver, module factories, parser, templates, and yeah, so you have uh, these important tappable instances in Webpack. We'll go deeper into them, like what they actually do one by one, and then we can actually. Okay, compiler is actually where your Webpack starts your like compilation or bundle generation. Compiler is a starting point. So what actually compiler does is it takes the config for the Webpack to run. So without a Webpack config, you can't actually start any Webpack, right? So compiler is, whenever you import this, if you see here, whenever you import a webpack config, it creates a compiler instance. So this gives you the flexibility to start the webpack build or the dev. So compiler is just it's an instance, it's a tappable instance which allows you to start the compilation process. So the second one in the list was compilation. Okay, don't mind about the dependency graph, which looks very complex. Even I didn't understand what is that about. I just got a random image from Google, but it has something a source client main.js, so I felt it's very informative. So compilation, as I was telling, Webpack before bundling things, right? It actually traverses through the files and creates a dependency graph, because without the dependency graph, it wouldn't be able to know what all are the files used and what are the files which are unused. If you might have seen, right, Webpack, usually we say there's a concept called tree shaking. So tree shaking is something like if you have any unused bundles, right, unused files, Webpack doesn't like include them in the bundles. Webpack just compiles and bundles only the used files. So this is the work of a dependency graph. Dependency graph does this work of just including all the used files in the graph. And this is a example of how a dependency graph looks. It's pretty complex, but it's fine. Like this is how actually a dependency graph looks. Okay, so once compilation has like created a dependency graph, right? But from a Webpack, in order to process the dependency graph, based on this information, I don't think it's enough for the Webpack, like what files are located where. So there is something called a resolver as a tappable instance. And this is what this resolver does is it provides a meta to every node in the dependency graph, like to every file, like where the file is located, what's the name of the file, what's the size of the file, and what is the absolute path of the file. So without this meta, it's very difficult for the Webpack to load the files and to create the bundles. So the resolver does this work of loading the files. It locates the files. It tells if the file is existing or not. If it is not existing, your Webpack throws an error. But if it is existing, your Webpack continues with the dependency graph resolver. So this is a resolver, and in Webpack, there's a in the Webpack code, right? If you go into the repository, there is something called as resolver factory.js. Again, this has like a set of tappable instances where actually you can like add any plugin on top of resolver factory. So you can Webpack gives you flexibility to add plugins on every stages. It's not just on the build start and build end. We'll see how to build a plugin as well in the later stages. Okay, so module factories. What these module factories do is Webpack loads everything, as I was telling, right? Webpack loads everything in the form of modules, even though it is a JS file or a CSS file or HTML, everything. So that's the reason you're using loaders, right? If you use a JSX, you use a Babel loader. So it needs modules for everything. So these module factories take care of generating these modules after the files are resolved. So what the resolver does is it gives the meta regarding the files, and the module factories use this meta, they locate the file, and they create a module out of it. So you see a lot of modules. If you see any bundle analyzer, right? You see a chunk and you see a lot of modules in that. So module factories work is something similar to that. Okay. So next comes is the parser. Parser is like, yeah, I was telling about abstract syntax tree, right? Now it has created modules and it has also read the dependency tree. But now the Webpack has a set of strings, so it can't understand the strings directly. So it needs a parser to understand them. So Webpack converts, this parser converts those modules into abstract syntax tree. So if you see how an abstract syntax tree look like, uh, function demo and console log hello react.js meetup. Okay. So if you see this, this is how your actually AST looks like. I've used the Babel parser to create a AST. You can actually use a AST generator as well. I was working on some other AST project. So this is how your AST actually looks like. You start, you have a start and so it converts everything. It reads this complete thing into the string, and it tells you this is where your code starts and this is where your code ends. So initially it reads a type file, and then in type program you can see what your body consists of. Like it's a function declaration. It starts at 0 and ends at string character 60. And if you see the location of this function declaration is line 1. So it has a lot of things like type block statement, type identifiers, type function declaration, type expression statement, this one. And we are calling this console log as a function, right? It has a call expression, it has member expression. So it has a lot of things. So Webpack does this work. It creates a dependency graph for that. Sorry, AST. And now we have a set of data which is actually parsed. So Webpack can read this and tell at what line what was there, right? So it's now it has everything to create the bundles. It has a dependency tree, it resolved it, it validated the dependency graph, now it located it, and now it created a modules, and after that it created a AST. So when it has a AST, it can just read the JSON and create bundles out of it. And finally, templates, right? You have something called templates. Like everyone might have at some point of time might have used templates in Angular, React, or some of the other places. So what templates usually do is they bind your data to a specific view. So here also Webpack has things called templates. So you have something, you have got the data already from the parser in the form of AST. So now you need to fill this data in the form of chunks or modules into templates. So templates take care of this. There are a lot of templates, but most important templates which I feel are like these three: module template, chunk template, and a dependency template. So module template takes care of creating a module or a bundle, and chunks are like you have when you do chunking in your project, right? You create a lot of sub bundles in the form of chunks. So your chunk template takes care of that, and similarly a dependency template. So templates takes care of creating the bundles from the generated AST actually. So if you see the whole process into a form of flow chart, right, which makes very easy because I've been talking for around 15-20 minutes and half of the things might have flown away. So I can actually sum up the whole thing in the form of a flow chart where it tells like Webpack starts the compilation through a compiler, and compiler gives you a compilation instance. And after compilation, it actually creates a dependency graph, and that is being resolved. And what are the non-JS files are being loaded by the loaders, and they are again converted to JS modules and they get resolved. And after that, we have a module factory which creates the modules, and then we parse things into AST through a parser, and then we load the parsed AST into chunk templates or other templates, and then finally we create a bundle file. That's it. The simple process is a very simple process. So yeah, it's very simple, right? So the most of the times when I talk about Webpack internals and all, I get this common question from everyone, like, hey, listen, I build just UI and front end. I should be more focusing on optimizations of React or like any other framework. Why should I like know about this? Is there any need? I feel like, yeah, when we are working on Webpack, right? Yeah, definitely it would be required because it's knowing about all these, it would help you to debug your Webpack more, and you can plug into any instance and you can optimize it more further. So I would suggest this is a great learning if you want to dive deeper into module bundling and packaging. So yeah, if you have any questions regarding the concepts, we can take it, or I can show some plugins. I can write some basic plugins, and then we can take up the questions regarding that. Anything is fine. So shall we move forward with the plugins?
Yes.
Okay. So was I clear so far? Because
Yes.
okay. So okay, nice. So for this, I'll be using a simple boilerplate which I have created in the recent times because I don't want to set up the webpack and all again. So I'll start with cloning this boilerplate and we will get started with that. Okay. So if you see, I have something called as config and I have something called as webpack prod, which is for production, webpack dev, and I have a webpack base config. It's a very usual webpack config, which I see everywhere, right? So, okay. So let's create a plugins folder in webpack and I will create a simple plugin.js. So I would write, what I would do is I will, as I was talking about tappable instances, I'll create a class for my plugin and I will try to start the compiler and pass a compilation instance through that. So for that, I would need a class simple webpack plugin. And whenever webpack loads this, right, it calls this apply. Apply gives you the compiler instance. Okay. And let module dot exports equal to simple webpack plugin. And to make my okay, I would like to install it. Let that be installed. So yeah, whenever I say like tappable instances, right? First question comes is how do I tap those instances? So Webpack gives you a set of hooks, they're not React hooks actually. Hooks, these hooks are completely different. With the introduction of Webpack 4, you had hooks, but before Webpack 4, there was something straightforward tappable instances. So Webpack hooks allows you to write a plugin at every step. Like you have something called done hook, you have after emit hook. Like once the compilation is done and bundles are like copied to the build folder, the after emit hook gets called. So whenever you see in the Webpack documentation, right, I can actually if you see these compiler hooks, right, Webpack has a set of compiler hooks and you will get all these. Like once you get the entry option, this hooks get called. Once you enter the after plugins option, this hook gets called. Similarly, you have a lot of things. So for the demo purpose, we will just use the done hook. Done hook is something when the compilation has been completed. If you want to do something like you want to build a post build plugin, so let's build a very simple post build plugin. Now I have the compiler instance. What I would do is before doing that, I would also add chalk.js so that my terminal looks more cleaner and colorful. What I'll do is compiler dot hooks. Now I will just do a done dot tap. What I'll do is I'll write the name of my plugin, which is simple webpack plugin, or you can name anything. So once that is done, you have stats. What is the stats? So we'll look into stats as well. So chalk dot green and build successful. Okay. What I'll do is I'll just use it as similar to other plugins. Just say a simple webpack plugin requires plugin simple plugin. And I'll just use this. Now let's run npm run build and let's see. Oh, why is it taking? Okay. Okay. So this is the bundle analyzer I was talking about. So these are the things, right? When I was telling templates. So these every chunk or the minified bundles are created through templates. So your AST will be something like index.bundle will be pointing to node modules, will be pointing to React DOM. So your templates create these things. Now let's see our Webpack post Webpack plugin, post build plugin has worked or not. If you see here, it says build successful. So it's like it has emitted that event. Like what I've done is I've taken a compiler instance, I've emitted a done event, and I've told Webpack. So whenever things are done, whenever you have finished the bundling and building, right, you just tell build is successful. So this was a very simple things. So now let's see what console of test gives, or what actually stats. Stat is an object which gives you. Okay, meanwhile we can see this. So if you see here, every bundle, okay, so every chunk has a template kind of thing. So whatever architectural diagrams you see for Webpack, right, they show a very similar thing. Yeah. So if you see, Webpack gives you the stats, like when was the build started, when was the build end, and what is the hash that was generated. And it also gives you a compilation hook. So you can actually use this stats.compilation dot options dot output dot path, if I'm not wrong. Chalk dot blue. Okay. So Webpack gives you the output path. So using this, like whenever you see a bundle analyzer or you see like any post build plugins, right, that analyze the bundle. Like I've built a simple plugin which actually analyzes the bundles in the command line interface. You don't have to install a bundle analyzer. You don't have to analyze it in HTML format. It directly analyzes the bundles in the form of graphs in your command line interface. So this is actually how it does. So what we do is we take the output path, because everyone has their own setup of outputs, right? So we take the output path and we use it. Okay. So let's assign it file path chunks. So we have the file path, right? And I would also use fs equal to require of fs. Fs dot read directory. I will read directory and I will read the file path. Let's see what are all the files that were console log of files. Files for each console log of file. For now we'll read it, but we will process something on that later. So what I'm doing is I'm taking the output directory from the Webpack. So I know from the compilation thing, like where the Webpack has emitted my files and where it has created, sorry for that, where it has created the bundles. You see, whenever I read it, right, so it generates a set of files, like what are the files. If you see the build, it has read it. It has read all the files and it has told me these are the generated bundles. So if you want to just like add a very simple bundle analyzer, I'm not showing a very complex one. I'm just going with a very basic one. So what we will do is we will require the path and fs dot stat. There are multiple ways of doing this. I'm just doing it in a simpler way to keep things very simple. Like there are many other hooks that provide you the direct information of the bundled files. File path of file. And what I will do is, as this gives a file size in bytes, I'll divide it with 1000 for now. And if I say if it is greater than 30 KB, console.chalk.read uh, file size exceeded size by 1000 and in the form of KB, or else what I'll do is, let's just do green file let's run the build. Chalk.green. Okay.
There's a typo for green. Chalk that. Okay, now you corrected it.
I corrected it. So if you see here, right, whatever files are greater than 30 KB, it just was turned into red. Like I just did a simple analyzing of my files. If it is greater than 30 KB, I'll show it in red and I say size exceeded and this is the size. And if the file is optimal, I'll just print it in green. Similarly, you can build a lot of things. If you see this plugin which I have built here, it's though it's not the complete thing which I wanted to, but it's, if you see the basic thing in this, okay. You see this, I just created a post build process and I was reading the files and I used the ASCII charts to do that, to create a simple analyzer for me. You can create a lot of things on top of it. It's not like this is the only restricted thing. You can use a lot of hooks to do that. Now let's see how do we debug a hook, like how do we debug Webpack, and I think after that I'll wrap it up. So for this, I'll be using Node Nightly. It is used for debugging the Node processes, but I feel like there are many, but you can directly use Node -f inspect, but I'm more comfortable with this. Let's create a script, Node Nightly, and I will run it in inspect mode. I will read the webpack. I need to give the exact path of the webpack because my Node Nightly doesn't take that. Webpack bin webpack.js, and I will give a config of, okay, I'll just give this config and I'll just put if I just want to debug this hook, so I'll just put a simple debugger. So if I run build debug, okay, Chrome inspect, so I will attach this and I'll debug this. So if you see this, it has stopped at this debugger point, right? I just wanted to debug the hooks, the done hook. And now if I see in the scope, these all things I have in the stats. Like my compilation has all these things. It has options. It has, like as I told, right, there are other ways of building a post like bundle analysis plugin. You have file dependencies. What are the files? You can create a dependency graph and see what it is happening. Similarly, you can actually debug any hook, and if anything breaks, you will easily understand where is exactly the error is located. And in this way, it helps in debugging your Webpack. So yeah, I think that's all I had with me. So open for questions.
Hi Uday, this is Sham. It's you have presented really cool stuff. It's like good to learn about the how we can create the plugins. So I have one real time problem. Like I have created a node package which provides some functions, utility functions, and I haven't used a Webpack in that node package, but I have created one more package which is based on React for the React components. So I am utilizing, importing that Node.js package in my React components package. So what is happening when I do the build? So complete library is coming, but complete package is coming in the build file, which I am importing. So can you please help me? Like, how can I solve that problem?
Yeah. So usually what we do is, if I understood it correctly.
Uday?
Yeah, Kiran.
Yeah. So we are running out of time. So if you don't mind, can you take this discussion in this channel? I posted a link. If you can go to that link, and if others have questions to Uday, right, you can go to that link and continue the discussion there.
Sure.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
No problem.
Sure. I think we have one last talk left. So I think Anil will take forward from here.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks, Kiran. Am I audible?
Yes.
Okay. So let me share my screen thing first. Is my screen visible to others?
Yes.
Okay. Cool. Yeah. So today we had really great talks. We wait. Let me see. I'm not able to see myself. Okay. So am I audible? Hello. Am I audible?
Yes.
So yeah, today we had really great talks. As it is the last talk, I'll not try to bore everyone. I'll try to make it quick, and so there will not be any coding sessions. And I did not plan for it also, but I will. I'm going to talk about building a front-end app once and reusing it always. So yeah, we'll talk more about that. What kind of problems? So more on that later. So what will be the agenda for this talk? We'll talk about what are the existing processes for the front-end deployment that we are having for various type of applications. We'll not focus more on very deep into different processes, but I'll just give a higher level overview of all that. We'll talk about shortcomings with those processes. What are the challenges that comes up with those processes? We'll talk about what is a specific problem that I faced, for which I was able to figure out a solution, and what are the challenges that I faced while implementing that solution. Then there should be a demo. So I'll be giving a demo where I'll be showing how that solution works out. And finally, I'll be doing a check on whether it is a perfect or can we make it better. So before we do that, bit about myself. My name is Anil Kumar Chaudhary. I write my thoughts and whatever I learn at simbathesailor.dev. I work at Sequoia Consulting Group. It's based out of Bangalore. So I love playing basketball, but now it's like, we all are uh, in home, so there's no basketball. But I also love watching it, and that is also not, NBA is also done for now for this year. So it's not. I'm not doing all that for now. I love front end and performance. Feel free to talk to me, reach out to me on Twitter. Talking, discussing. You can discuss anything on front end and performance. I'll be, ready to, pitch in and share my ideas. So let's start with the different build processes that front end apps have. So typically, like, if we don't talk about any frameworks like React, Angular, or Vue.js, or any other kind of framework or libraries, it's just that browser understands index.html, JavaScript, and CSS. All every bundler does that same thing. It bundles it and give it to the browser. Browser knows how to render it. So that is the whole way of doing it. Like now we used to have just one index.html, and we used to add scripts manually, but now we have bundles. So we had a great talk about Webpack. I came to know a lot more about Webpack in the previous talk. So moving on with the bundlers, not bundlers, the frameworks we have, they usually bundle your code. And how typically if you do it, we have some code like here you can see in the blue color, we have the code. This is code which is there in your repository, the code base that you are working on. Then we have some kind of env parameters. So in a typical application, we have different endpoints for different environments. When I talk about environments, that is something like staging, pre-prod, production, and UAT, these kind of environments. So if you have both the things, you can actually um, run your code through a bundler, and that is your build process. And that build process will spit out the build folder. Okay, so that is the more or less the idea. That this idea differs for some cases where we have server-side rendered app, where we are at the runtime we are generating the HTML and all that stuff. That is another thing, but in most of the cases we do this thing. So yeah, so when the build process is running, the build process does lot many things. Like it installs the package, it does the minification, it runs the test. If you have private packages, it will do the installing the private packages. It will create your final files, and then if there is any kind of, if you are fine tuning it, that also can be part of your build process. So for our code base, it used to take 15 minutes of our time. And the kind of application that I have worked in, it takes around 5 to 7 minutes. Are like very. So am I audible? So
Yes.
Okay. Sorry. Cool. So yeah, typically it takes like 5 to 7 minutes of time to do all that stuff. But in our case, it was 15 minutes. That depends on the kind of application you have and number of applications you have. So for us, deploying this application on UAT, pre-production and production, it was taking around 15 minutes, and that's not optimal. And plus we also use Docker. So Docker, for those of who don't know about Docker, Docker is just a virtualized OS. It's just a box which keeps your which keeps your um, the build, whatever the build folder that we generated here in a box. Like it has all the system, it meets all the system requirements, and is fully capable of running your application. So that's a Docker image. As a front-end guy, I know this much about the Docker we are using in our application. So creating a new Docker image is not optimal for each and every environment. So that's the problem that was actually was faced by our DevOps team. I have written an article also on that, how this all problem came up, and what was the actual problem. But this is the gist of all the problem. Like they don't want to create a Docker image for different environments again and again. So what are the existing solutions that we have? So existing solution, like we can have a separate .js file for various environments and load it before other scripts in your web page. Like you can load it in the head, and then once that is loaded, then you can set it to the global scope. So in Windows, that's like on the browser, the global scope is nothing but your Windows. So you set it like window dot some param equal to that some value, that is that you must have already kept it ready and just serving it from your public folder. The above process has following drawbacks. So putting anything in global scope is not safe at all. So people might come up with a number of things like it is safe with the right set of permissions, but it's like but there is so many checks to make before saying it confidently that yeah, it is safe, that putting things in the windows is safe, at the windows scope is safe. So I never went to this way. I thought of not putting the param values in global scope. And then the if somehow we are able to do that, the above one is right set for you. So there will be changes in how you are writing your code, how you are actually consuming process.env, some kind of parameters, and also a lot of sync up may be required between for deployments. You may have to talk to developers, whether you have updated this file or not and all that. So this is a problem which I have not reached that stage where I did not follow this step, but I can properly see that these all problems will be not so far. Okay, so there was one more solution. Our application uses the Webpack. So our application is based on the Create React app boilerplate. We have exited from their default script. Now we are using so we can make changes in the Webpack. So one of the option people suggested that go for the define plugin, but define plugin is something that happens in the build process. But that's the thing, I don't if that is happening in the build process, I cannot separate the env injection process, I cannot separate it. So that again I'll reach to the same problem. And then there were more challenges. I think I have mentioned in an article that I'll be linking in the references section, that you can give a read. So saying all that, what if we have one more step, like in here we have this step, where we were actually building, and there was only one process, one step where we are building your project and just giving that bundle to the Docker image. What if we can have two steps? So going forward, so I came up with this solution. So the red one is the, so let me explain you what's happening here. So this is your code. This box, as you can see, is your code, and the red section is what is happening in most of the application. So you have a code in which you are using process.env dot react underscore app underscore test, and that get replaced by some value. That value you are getting from some kind of param store. Now once this bundle is generated, that bundle cannot be used for different environments. The reason being that code is very specific to now staging now, because there's no way to there's no deterministic way of pulling those things out, because by that time a lot of minifications and dead code removal might have happened due to the bundler, due to the our wonderful bundler who have removed all the things. It's not that easy, and it's not at all safe. So what can be done? So and let's now focus on the green step. So the green step is, in the first step we can not replace this process.env.react the thing kind of strings, and just replace it with some kind of placeholder. And once after the step one, we get a bundle with some kind of placeholders. That placeholders can be filled later on in the step two. Okay, so now this bundle is environment agnostic. So this bundle can be used across environments easily. Now I just need to run some script that I'm going to talk about. That script will actually inject these param values. That param values are coming from a param store to these, and for us it was taking less than 5 seconds now. So and so before I tell few things about that process, I'll just explain the phase one thing. So what's happening in phase one? So we are making use of the Babel parser. So Babel parser is it allows you to convert your code to ASTs. I'm again talking about ASTs. ASTs are really it looks like very difficult, but when you start working with it, then it's just a set of object, a nested object that you have to play around. And even myself, when I was working on it, it took me a lot of time to try out various combination. I learned a lot there. So in the first step, I'll be passing the code with Babel parser. That will give me, why I'm doing it with the Babel parser, because I have to be precise that I am replacing the correct, variables. I'm not replacing any string like process.env, something. I am actually replacing member identifiers or variables. So that's for that, it gives you the confidence that you are replacing it at the correct place. Then this is the part of the AST, because process.env, that's a member identifier type of a node that you can identify, and then you replace it with a template string. What is the template string that I was able to figure out? So this looks very cryptic and fuzzy to people, but this is something like $_ internal. So I try to make it so unique so that it cannot be, if someone wants to overwrite it, then they can overwrite it, but there's no way, like, if it should not be done mistakenly. So this was there, and there's a part called process.env.react_app. This is your param name, so that I'll be making use to replace it in the second step. But there is one more thing which is very crazy, like math.random. Why there is a math.random? Because it's very difficult to figure out which Babel loader or which Babel plugin is actually making that dead code removal. If I'll not add math.random, what will happen? My bundler will remove this piece of code. If there is a truthy value, if there is a falsy value, then it will remove that piece of code. That is that code removal. They'll remove it. So I don't want that to happen, because I want those things to be available for my second step. So for that, I need to create some kind of confusion for Babel to do this. For that, math.random was used. So when using math.random, my bundler is lost. Like what it will do, it will not replace it. It will keep it as it is. Then in the phase 2, what I'll do, I have one script that will actually replace this template string with the actual values. And these actual values are coming from any kind of param store. And then in our case, in our specific case, we are gzipping the new content and starting the server. So this is the whole idea. The implementation detail can be, differ from, bundler to bundler, but this is the whole idea. That's what I'm doing. So moving ahead, let me, so I came up with a Webpack loader that I was able to create. So don't, so people who have not worked on Webpack loader, don't get scared with this thing, like, we have to create a Webpack loader and all that complexity. The main idea was this one only. So yeah, so I'll just walk like it. I'll stop share for a second. Anyone help
Hi.
me? Why I'm not able to escape from this thing? Hello?
Is there a protocol to ask questions, or can I ask in the middle?
Yeah, so you're not able to exit full screen or something?
Yeah, I'm not able to exit it.
On the top, there is a green bar, right? View options, maybe.
Wait. Okay, yeah. Cool. Sorry. Is my screen visible to others?
Yes.
Yeah. Right. Cool. So yeah, So I was able to create a Webpack loader. Like I will not go that deep, but just I want to give a 1 minute thing for how to use it. So just a Webpack loader that I have added it, because not every time you want to replace all the you don't want to escape or avoid replacing all the param values. Like node environment will not change across staging, pre-prod and production. That is, so that there should be one option to exclude some kind of param names. So that's what the option is for. This is a plugin which is used for the Babel parser. So Babel parser, we have to tell that it is a JSX or it is a TSX. So I have written detailed explanation here how to use it. This is just for the enabling, so you can have a production key check here and accordingly set the boolean flag to it. And then you have a debug. If you have debug, so some kind of logs will come and that will help you out. So that is one thing. And apart from that, as so there is this phase 2 where I have to replace the template string with the actual value. For that, there is one more script that I am actually exposing with this loader, which actually does that. So it just, you have to create a payload and give the path of the file, like the when I'll be showing the demo, I'll properly show what's happening here. But basically, you just pass set of options, and this env is nothing but which is coming from your param store, and it will automatically go and replace all the env values. Okay, and that's pretty much about it, and it's written in TypeScript. So type helps will be there. So moving on with that, uh, so let us begin, and I'll just show you one demo. So there's one sample application where I have used it. So is my screen visible?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So this is the project, and
Then just one thing.
yeah, tell me.
Maybe zoom a little bit.
Okay, yeah. So wait. So this is just a application. I'll go to the. I'll just zoom in that terminal part.
Then just needed one clarification.
Yeah, tell me.
Yeah, so just for clearing that, you are not using the Webpack compression plugin to compress the and make zip, no?
Yeah. I'm
So
not using.
it's like just building it for just making the skeleton out of it, and then replacing it with the environment variables, and then zipping it.
Yeah. I'll talk more about that in the sections which can be, what things can be done better here.
Okay, yeah, thanks.
So yeah, so this is the application, which is just bootstrapped from a Create React app. It's just having a simple file like app.js, and for us, like we have this is a sample application where we have certain values like process.env, like typically how we write it in an application, and we have something in JSX also like process.env and something like that, and we have a const file which is also exporting this kind of stuff. Now what I'm going to do, I have already added this loader in my Webpack config. So this is the loader that I have added. So the same way I have shown in the GitHub README. So these are the param values which I don't want to which I want to replace in the first code. I don't want to keep it for the second step. And then there's a plugin because my code is written in JSX. I'm not using TypeScript. And then there's a check for the enable, and this is just one setting, and I'm just that is one setting that I have done. So let me run the build thing. So what it will do, it will actually run your thing, And I'll show you the bundle once this is done. I'm not sure why it is taking so much time.
You said the project was ejected from Create React App?
Yeah, yes. It is just a small file, so it is taking so much time. Okay, cool, thank God. Okay, so let's go to this file. This is a static file. Inside this, I'll just show you what happened after this first run. So this is what is being available to you after the first step. So you can see all the things have been replaced with this kind of stuff. So this is all not like this is not deployable anywhere because still we have to inject the param values, and there are certain values which we have put it in the excluded list, like this console.log production, because here in the source we have something like console.log process.env.node underscore v. As we are running the production build and it was in the excluded list, it got replaced in the first queue only. It did not got replaced with something like this. So that is what you get after the first step. Okay, now let's the second step, that same script is giving me one more function, that is inject env. So in this I'm actually passing, because I know that my JS file is present here in my build folder, and these are the patterns that I want to check for, and these are my env parameters. So these env parameters, again, I'm saying that this can be come from anywhere. Okay, and then debug is true. Let me run that script. Once I run this script, then again let's go to the build folder and see what replacements I've done to our bundle file. So now you can see that kind of weird looking strings have really gone, and we have these actual values with us. Okay, now to just make it a complete code, let's run this project and see whether this thing works. So running this thing, and yeah, it works. So that's how it can be done in two phases. So the second phase just did the dependency injection. So that same build can be used for various environments. So moving on to the slides. Yeah, so that was the demo. So one question comes up, like, can we do better? So yeah, right now, like, the gzipping part, the compression plugin I have removed from the webpack, because uh, I need to create a gzip again. For that, that can be easily done. That that can be written in, like, I have also written one of the package that can be done. That is very trivial. But once this kind of comparison, like, what is the problem is we have to minifying the code after the env injection. So once we are not replacing the code in the first step, what drawback it is, what drawbacks are there, that some code will be there that can be extra, because that would have got removed by the bundler. But as the bundler, we are not replacing those things. Okay, then bundler will won't have any idea whether to replace this dead code or not. So that can be done, and I have already I've already done this part, but it's just that I have not pushed it. So I am making use of Tensor plugin. So Tensor plugin can be run separately, which can does this minification. It can remove all the dead code. So that is one thing. And better way of replacing the process env string in the bundled code. So the second step, where we are replacing the process.env string, like the template strings, there can be a better way, like, there I'm actually doing the string comparison and adding a lot of checks there. But I think I have tried it out with the Babel parser, but there were some limitations. But I think that is doable. I'm all like I'm pretty sure that it can be done, but there are certain challenges that I'm still figuring out. So if that is done, then we can be sure always that this check will never fail. So what's the current status? How, like, are we using it in our application? Yeah, we are using in our application in our company. It will be in production in 1 or 2 weeks. It's just a matter of weeks. But yeah, that is up and running on our environments. So that is one thing. And before I end my talk, I'll just want to share one thought that I learned during preparation of this thing. So problems are the seed for innovation. So never, it's very hard to solve the problems which are very far away from you. Like, I don't know, like I cannot solve a problem for Airbnb and maybe Netflix, because I don't work there. Because you have to first reach to those problems, and then only you can solve it. I think seeing the problems around you and finding out solution is a good way to start innovation and feel contentful and happy about your work. So that's one thing I want to share with you all, that I'm still learning, and I learned a lot during this whole process. So these are the references that you people can, everyone can go here and read about it. And that's the wrap. I think that's my talk. Thank you for listening me out. Thank you.
Nice talk, Anil.
Thank you, Kiran.
So if you have any questions, maybe you can unmute and ask questions now.
I have a question actually.
Yeah.
So you're fantastic talk, by the way. Thank you. So you are doing all this process because you are ejecting the Create React app, and then that is because you don't have everything available to you while you using Create React app. So you have to configure it and all that process, right?
No, so that's not the goal. The goal was to to reduce the time across environments.
Okay.
Like we typically changing the React code base, the Create React app without ejecting. Like there were hurdles in the team we were not able to figure out. So that's the reason we ejected out from the Create React app. But that was not the goal. The whole idea was to share the same bundle across the environments. So our lot of work, like for us, it was 15 minutes. We were able to save around 15 minutes. Like let's say you have a very crucial bug on the production now. If you have a tag already tested and tested by a testing team on pre-production environment, then you can just deploy it in like 1 minute or 1.5 minutes, depending on the setup you have. So that was the primary goal.
So was there any reason to use Create React app instead of scaffolding using Webpack from the start?
So most of the apps use Create React app. So that decision was already taken, like by you. Yeah, so the project was already made.
Because on the Create React official documentation from Facebook itself, they recommend that to use it for smaller and medium scale applications. But when you start building your large applications, it's good if you start scaffolding it from the start, right?
Yeah, so I'm not sure about that, but like I have not faced any problems yet. Like, or my colleagues have not faced any problems yet while using Create React for bigger applications also. That is again, like once your application grows, a lot of customizations will be needed, and I think by that time, people will.
That's the point. You hit the nail. So when you need more customizations, then you are better off not using Create React app and start building your own Webpack or roll-up configurations on your own.
Yeah.
So how many screens your application has got?
I don't have a count, but I don't know, maybe 50, 60 screens. I don't know.
Okay, fine.
Yeah.
Just curious, actually.
Yeah, no problem.
So, like, do you have any other questions?
I'm good, by the way.
I have one question. So let's say you build this Webpack build once, right? So if there is no code change and if I want to deploy it again, so how do you manage the previous build?
There's no code change.
Basically, you said like there's a already pre-built something, right, in pre-prod, and I can reuse. So how does you manage whether you pick from the servers, right, pre-prod, or is there somewhere stored something somewhere else?
Yeah. So yeah, I got your question. So we have Docker images. So DevOps team actually, whenever we are building it, so through the Jenkins builds, they create a Docker image and keep it ready. So next time they have to deploy it for another environment, they just make use of that same Docker image. So that's how they are doing.
Okay. Thanks.
Sure. If you don't have more questions, then we can end the session. I hope you enjoyed. Like all the 5 talks today are very good, very informative. Thanks for all the speakers, and thanks for all the attendees who joined and interacted. See you next month again. Bye.
Thanks, Kiran, for setting up this. I've been always wanting to join this conversation. I'm joining from Dallas, actually. I've been following this group for a while now, and I didn't get an opportunity to join you guys because the times are off, right? So you are doing daytime, we are in the middle of the night, and I just woke up and I just randomly thought of see what's going on. And great talk, by the way, actually, fantastic.
Yeah,
I just got to see only one talk, actually.
Okay, so we'll be sharing the links for the YouTube entire thing. Maybe you can follow up there.
Where can I? So you share it in the meetup itself? You meetup.
I can
location?
give you I can give you the link. I'll put the YouTube link in the chat.
Okay.
Yeah,
perfect.
this
Thank
is where
you. I got it.
Yeah, this is where we streamed the entire thing. Yeah.
Okay. Perfect. Thanks.
Thanks. Okay, then see you all next month. Bye.
Thanks, Kiran. Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.